краю нашого неволі, я полкового знамена, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою всі скидання, воно вібрало у собі, всю кров
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 423 of the news. And as always, it's good to see you all once again in the chat.
And of course, we are going to be getting right into the news of the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. And moving on into Russia immediately, we got a report from the British Ministry of Defense that is starting to show that there are cracks starting to form that are massive within the Russian propaganda sector, as it is incredibly difficult for the Russians to justify the war as it continues to go on. And also, there's a lot of questions, even in higher up members of the war, like Prighozin, about why the war is even going on. And according to the Ministry of Defense report, they state that the Russians are struggling to maintain a consistency in their core narrative, of course, like we've been seeing for a while now, and then they list off a couple of examples, and some of these we've actually shown on stream before, and some of them happened just days ago. Like on the 18th of April, the Russian state media announced the cancellations of this year's Immortal Regiment of the Great Patriotic War Remembrance Marches on safety grounds. Now, what these are, and we'll type in the Great Patriotic War Remembrance, and let me make sure I get it correct, the wordage correct, remembrance marches, are these right here. This is what the Immortal Regiment is on the Great Patriotic War Day. It occurs after Victory Day parades inside of the Russian Federation on the 9th of May, and it's pretty much families that come out into the street and they march down the main avenue of their city, and they hold up the pictures that have the members of their family that fought in the Great Patriotic War, or the Second World War as we call it here in the West, and died. The reason why these are not being run this year, although they were run last year, and that's something very important to note, is that last year the war had been going on for months at this point, and there were marches like these, and there was no safety incidents, no safety problems to be brought up back then. Nothing happened at all. But this year, they're canceling them. And the reason why they're saying it's most likely being canceled is because so many of the people who would have been a part of these marches before are dead now, and so they can't even carry the signs of their dead relatives, and so they've decided to cancel it altogether, so that way no one can see how heavy the losses really have been in this current war in the groups of people who are Russian patriots, which in most parts of the country, except for Moscow and St. Petersburg, those losses would be incredibly high. Moving
also,
on.
didn't someone in Ukraine put a reward out if they could send a drone in to do something to that event if they held it, that they would get some kind of monetary prize?
I haven't heard about that, actually, so I can't really confirm or deny that. But moving on to the next bit, we saw that Yevgeny Prighozin, and this has been known for a little bit of a while now, but once again showing the massive rifts that are starting to form inside of Russian propaganda circles, we heard that Yevgeny Prighozin is starting to, of course, publicly question whether there are any Nazis in Ukraine at all. And I think this questioning on Prigozhin's end is circling around him leading the Wagner unit and seeing real Nazis and then wondering if the people they're fighting really are Nazis or whether they are the Nazis. And of course we know that the Wagner unit is filled with a decent amount of Nazis, actually. And then the last bit of news that the Ministry of Defense talked about is that on the 12th of April, the state news agency RIA Novosti reported unique documents of FSB articles implicating the Nazis in the murder of 22,000 Polish nationals in the Katyn massacre of 1940. In reality, the FSB's predecessor agency, the NKVD, or later on the KGB, was responsible for the Katyn massacre. The Russian State Duma officially condemned Joseph Stalin for ordering the killings in 2010. But, of course, the information about the Soviet Union's direct involvement in the Katyn massacre really didn't come out until just recently, just about a couple of weeks ago. If many of y'all do not know, the Katyn massacre is after the Polish were decisively defeated on the field by both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union at the same time of the Second World War. The Soviets, under the leadership of Stalin, of course, went out of their way to make sure to purge any kind of remnants of Polish leadership within the occupied areas that the Soviet Union controlled. And so they took 20,000 of these guys that they had already rounded up and arrested and kind of sat around in a camp for a little while like a gulag. They took them out to the forest near Katyn, and they killed 20,000 of these people in a mass grave. Of course, the Soviets denied ever doing this. The Germans also did this as well on their end inside of their part of occupied Poland. But when the Germans started the offensive during Operation Barbarossa and rolled over Katyn, they found the mass grave, and of course they acted like it was shocking that anyone would do that, although the Germans did much similar things, like the Katyn massacre. The Russians, of course, well, the Soviets at the time, would deny ever having any involvement in that massacre until later on after Stalin died, and then they kind of waffled around a little bit, didn't really make a lot of comments on it after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Russian government in 2010, of course, condemned Stalin and said that Stalin was the one who most likely perpetrated those crimes against the Poles. And now, of course, more information is coming out giving the direct details and direct involvement of units like the NKVD and what they did to execute the 20,000 or so Polish officers and government officials. And so it appears that, of course, not really a good picture is being painted anymore of the Russians. And obviously, the Russians are always talking about a great patriotic war. They're almost always comparing the war in Ukraine to the Great Patriotic War. Now, you can see that it wasn't really that great, nor was it patriotic to kill 22,000 Polish nationals in a massive grade. And so, with that, I hope that it does address the Russians breaking down a little bit fairly well. And once again, we'll be waiting and looking forward to seeing how much further the Russians break down. Even as we speak right now, although we have not been able to confirm this news, and I saw it circling around today, the Russian flagship called Peter the Great, and let me type this in, it is and let me make sure I'm correct, it is, let's see, Peter, it's a Kirov-class battle cruiser. This is actually the largest active ships in any navy in the world that are not an aircraft carrier right here. They're actually saying that Peter the Great, which is one of these Kirov-class ships, and the flagship of the Northern Fleet, will be decommissioned most likely within the next few months and taken for scrapping because the Russian government is so financially strapped that it really can't handle the excessive monetary burden of trying to keep a ship of this size running. Of course, we haven't been able to confirm that information yet. That's just kind of been circling around on gossip news articles and gossip channels, so of course we can't really back that one up. And I have to say that as many times as I can, but it is very interesting to hear that the rumor is even circling around. They say that supposedly they'll be modernizing another ship and bringing it into service in 2024 in replacement of Peter the Great, but they probably won't, considering how financially bad off the Russian Federation is at this moment. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into the northern border of Ukraine, where we can see that the Ukrainian border guards are tirelessly working to still lay down even thousands more mines in the northern area to make sure that if, for some reason, any kind of military force attempts to cross the Ukrainian northern border again, it'll be fairly difficult for them and the offensive will be slowed down. We can see them planning some of the mines right here, of course not getting into the exact details of where these minefields are and how many of them the Ukrainians are laying out, but it is exceptional to know that the Ukrainians are still taking northern border security very seriously and making sure that the Russians will stay down in the southeastern areas where the counteroffensive will most likely be beginning here in the future. We're also going to be moving on into the western area of Ukraine near Ternopil. Of course, this marker is somewhat inaccurate. It's just in the western training field. We don't really know exactly where it is. But we saw that they were bringing a leopard through its paces and testing it in the Ukrainian mud. And so here's the clip. And let me see if it has any music. It probably does, so we're going to mute it. But we can see this.
They're listening to Ukrainian radio, it sounds like.
Trapaholics. But we can see them driving through the mud. Some pretty muddy stuff. Honestly, it looks like an Alabama dirt road. And we can see that they're slowly moving it through. And this one kind of looks like it may be a Leopard 2A5. Or a Leopard 2A6, because it looks like it has that frontal armor wedge that they added on the Leopard 2A5s and 6s. Nevertheless, still very cool to see that there are Leopard 2s on the training fields of Ukraine, and we'll eventually be seeing these things on the front line, most likely involved in the counteroffensive, which should be coming up soon. We're now going to be moving out of that western training field and on into our location unknowns. And we've been seeing a pretty interesting amount of location unknowns and a wide variety, starting off with a Ukrainian soldier cleaning up a Leopard 2A4. And so here's the clip. Of course, we're going to have to mute it because there's Chad music playing, but we can see the guy with a brush, and they're just cleaning out that Leopard 2A4 after it appears to have been on a training exercise. Of course, there are a lot. What are you laughing at, Matthew?
I was about to say, I've never seen somebody so happy to do the grunt work. This guy is getting it.
Man, this guy is getting jiggy with it. Look at him.
They're always in good spirits no matter what they're doing. If they're fighting in the middle of like a really fierce battle or even cleaning a tank, they're always in good spirits.
They are, and you got to give them a lot of credit because there's a lot of times they could be miserable, yet they always keep their spirits really high. But I think his spirits really high because he's probably one of the tankers that has been assigned to the Leopard 2A4, and he's like, I don't have to drive in some Soviet garbage yet. And so he's like dancing for that probably. But man, I gotta say, he's done a really good job cleaning that turret too. I mean, once it dries off, it'll look like it's never been in the mud before. But still, great to see that this guy is enjoying his brand new Leopard 2A4. It only costed 5 million euros when it was originally made. So of course, I think anyone driving around a 5 million euro main battle tank would probably be pretty happy that they're the ones in it instead of anyone else. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into the next one, where we saw 2 Ukrainian soldiers enjoying some Easter bread, also called Pascha. One of them is a Jew and the other one is a Muslim. The importance of pointing that out is because, you know, the Russians are always claiming, even to this day, the best they can, although it's being questioned heavily even inside of Russia, that the Russians are fighting Ukrainian Nazis. But it wouldn't make a lot of sense for the Ukrainians to be Nazi if there was a Jew and a Muslim serving in the Ukrainian army. And these aren't just a single isolated 2 of them here. Of course, there are thousands of Ukrainian Jews and Ukrainian Muslims that are fighting in the Ukrainian army each day, day in and day out. But here's a clip of them eating some Pascha.
А це ви дивитесь, як євреї та мусульмани їдять пасочку в нацистській, українській нацистській армії. От так от.
And with that, that's the end of the clip, but great to see that, of course, the Ukrainians are obviously not Nazis, and that the soldiers are getting along regardless of their background. We're now moving on to our next clip of Location Unknown News, where we saw that an award has actually been given to the Mustache Man. We have not seen the Mustache Man on film for quite a while now, but he did actually receive a medal from the Ukrainian government for his service in the defense of their country. And we can see the pictures of it right here. And also we can see the translation over here as well. Yankov, last name unpronounceable, sadly, I don't know how to pronounce that. An encouraging award of the main directorate of Intelligence Ministry Defense of Ukraine for courage in performing special tasks. And then, you know, it was, of course, signed off by the Minister of Defense. Well, actually, I think that's the Deputy Minister of Defense. But still, great to see that they were able, that the Mustache Man was able to get an award for everything he's done in Ukraine, because he, of course, has been doing an incredible job and has been known the world over for his impressive mustache and also representing the Belarusian volunteers. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of Location Unknown News, where we also saw a drone bomblet hitting the Russians. We see the Russians right here beside this train track, the bomblet on its way, and the bomblet hit its target, taking out the 2 Russians. Well, more like wounding them. But still, 2 Russians were taken out, and it appears that those guys will probably be out of the war, at least for the rest of it. We're now going to be moving on into our next bit of Location Unknown News, where we also saw another direct hit on a Russian position. And so here's the clip. And we're going to have to mute that because that is clearly copyrighted. And also, dearly. So we can see the video, and we can see the Russians hanging out everywhere. We can see a little bit of infrared of them in multiple places. We can see the first artillery shell land lower to the end of the screen. We can see the smoke now dissipating, and we can't really tell what kind of damage that's caused to the Russian forces there. But we can now see that the squad has picked up and is moving through the open field that they've been stuck in, and we can see that another shell landed right in the middle of their unit and appears to have scattered them around a little bit. While the Russian forces are never really able to get down squad spacing all too well, it does appear that the artillery helps to space out the pieces of them that are left. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip of Location Unknown News and on into our last one, where we saw the Russian casualty report for the last 24 hours. And it
Oh,
is...
yes, sir. 3 Bobcats, baby.
Leo! I gotta tell you, it's best. It's absolutely incredible. And it's
Let's see
nice.
the memes. Let's see those memes.
Man, we got memes. We got a lot of them, actually. Look at all of them.
Oh, yes, sir.
Man, look at that. A load of them.
Hey, they even had an office meme in there. What do you know?
What do you know?
Nice.
What do you know? And look at that. Even more of them. Even more of them. Another one. Oh, it's flamethrower. And another one.
Oh, that's pretty sick, actually.
And we got the clown. We got the clown again. Sure, real independent. Lame. Apparently, get a load of this. But anyways, quite a lot of memes. The memes are never ending tonight. I gotta thank everyone for always repping the set for the LSA and always showing off the Bobcat memes. And it is, of course, a day of celebration as far as the Bobcat skid steer memes go, because 3 of them have been destroyed over the past 24 hours. And of course, needless to say, that is a pretty decent number. Not only that, but we saw an incredibly high number of anti-aircraft systems getting destroyed today, a total of 4 of them, which is equivalent to around $60 million, and that's just a rough approximation of anti-aircraft system damages caused to the Russian armed forces today. $60 million. That's getting close to being $100 million, and then from there, we move on up into other categories, but still, love to see it, Matthew. Don't you love to see it? I love to see it.
I love to see it, and in rubles, that's probably something like 100 billion or some crazy amount.
Yeah, probably. Or it's about 5 trillion Japanese yen. We also saw that 8 drones were shot down over the past 24 hours as well. Quite a decent number. Of course, we don't know what kind. They could have been Shaheds, Orlons, or any other kind of drone, but we do know that 8 of them were shot down. A total of 5 artillery pieces were also destroyed over the past 24 hours, meaning that an entire artillery battery plus 1 extra artillery piece in total was destroyed over 24 hours. Not that bad. We also saw that 4 main battle tanks also were destroyed over the past 24 hours once again, and that is actually getting a little bit on up there, especially compared to the last month's average. And so it is good to know that an entire 4 tanks were destroyed. Only 5 supply trucks, however, were destroyed over the past 24 hours. We have seen higher numbers than that on average throughout most of the war, but it's nothing to scoff at. It is still a decent number, it's just that it has on average been higher. We also saw that 4 armored personnel carriers were destroyed over the past 24 hours. Once again, a little below average, but the infantry losses of 680 troops in the past 24 hours is certainly not low. That's getting on up there towards the higher end figures of the entirety of the war. And so it is absolutely incredible to know that the Ukrainians have been able to still inflict losses like these, and with the Russians getting very close, just 4 months into this year, of reaching 200,000 Russian soldiers killed, it's starting to beg the question again, whether the Russians will be able to survive this entire war or not. At least the Russian army will be able to survive the entire war or not. Taking losses like these out of an army that is around 1 million strong means that there has to be a equally large number, almost 3 times larger than the number killed, that have been wounded and taken out of the war due to their wounds. And so it is it is unbelievable to think how many Russian soldiers have been replaced at this point in the war. And one thing that I found really interesting is that the Russian Victory Day parade is coming up. Russian Victory Day will be on May 9th again, and they are having the Victory Day parade. And I think what will be very important to notice during that parade is what do the infantry in the units look like that are participating in the parade. If they all look incredibly young, they may be brand new. If they look quite old, they may also be brand new. Because I saw in the rehearsal, I did watch a little bit of the rehearsal for the Victory Day parade, and it did look as though there were a decent amount of old and young guys in there, and there were not a lot of the, I guess you could say, fighting age men that we've seen fighting in Ukraine. It appears that a lot of those guys have either gotten wounded or killed, and so they're even running out of those kinds of soldiers to put into the Victory Day parade. Unlike last year, where we actually saw that there were a decent amount of those kinds of soldiers there. It looks like they may be missing at least during the rehearsals this year. And so with that, once again, not bad losses whatsoever, and we're now going to be moving on from the casualty report and on into Belgorod, because we saw something interesting today. Many of y'all may know the jokes and the memes that have been surrounding Belgorod lately after the Russians dropped a bomb onto Belgorod, and some people have been saying, oh, my silly enforcer, you inept, stupid idiot. They only dropped the one because it fell off the pylon. Well, it appears that they didn't just drop the one. They dropped 2 bombs on Belgorod. A second one was found today, and they're now evacuating people out of the city. 3,000 of them, actually, that were in the area. So they have the buses there, like it's Chernobyl, and they're getting ready to bring them on out. And so, here's the clip. You can see all of the buses lined up.
They need that loudspeaker playing like during the Chernobyl evacuations. Vynanye, Vynmanye.
Nemanja, Gaborit, Moskva.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Take only what you need with you. It will only be temporary. It will only be for 3 days' time. Only take what is necessary. You will not be returning back after you get on the bus until it is safe.
But quite a large amount of buses, and kind of like in typical Soviet or typical Russian fashion, these people will probably be out of here for a good while and may not be coming back for a pretty decent amount of time. Of course, who knows? They're probably going to detonate the bomb wherever it is and then probably bring them back immediately, because moving 3,000 people out of their city and elsewhere is pretty disruptive. So they may just be taking them onto a little bus ride into the countryside and then bringing them right back after the bomb's blown up. But still, very wild to hear that there has been an entire second bomb dropped onto the city of Belgorod, and that starts to disprove the concept that it was a bomb that just fell off the rack. Because there's no way, because as far as I understand it, the Su-34 can only carry about one bomb per pylon. I don't think there's any pylons on the Su-34 that can carry multiple bombs on a single pylon, but let me make sure. So you see that right there? That's an Su-34 that is laden with bombs, as many bombs as the Su-34 can carry, and each one is on an individual pylon. There are no bombs that are on a single pylon, like you would see sometimes on a U.S. Air Force aircraft, where the pylons can get long enough that a single pylon can carry two of them. So I'm supposing, I'm not really a pylon expert, that if that one pylon had a failure, both of the bombs could fall off. Having two pylons fail on a single plane during a single sortie over a single specific spot is incredibly unlikely, and once again throws into, I guess you could say, straight misinformation that it had a failure and the bomb dropped for that reason. These pilots deliberately dropped the bombs on Belgorod, thinking that it was Kharkiv, which is around 50 miles away from Belgorod. That is the only way that two bombs could have dropped on it, because the odds of two pylons having a malfunction and dropping live bombs in the same area at the same time is unlikely, because that means the whole plane the plane would have just dropped all of the bombs, and we wouldn't be talking about just one or two of them, we would be talking about 6 of them. So this had to have been deliberate. And so, with that, very interesting to hear, there has been a second bomb, and we're now going to be moving on from...
Before you move on from this, I saw a really good catch by Richard Quick. You mentioned they might be returning after the bomb is cleared and everything. They might be loading those people up on buses, to try to conscript them and take them to the front line as an alternative.
That is morbid! Oh my god, what if they
Richard
were doing
was
that?
thinking deep on that one.
What if they were doing that, though? That wouldn't be that far-fetched for the Russians at this point.
No.
But then again, what if there's kids and women on the buses, though? Like, what are they going to do with them?
They might let them go and keep the men.
That's true. That's true. And also, Hansen also brought up a really good point. He said, that response is a bit excessive for one unexploded bomb. Are we sure there aren't more? And that's a good point. It may be that they found out that they dropped the entire load of bombs on the Belgorod, and they were lucky because only one of them blew up, but now they're figuring out that they came back to base with only 5 bombs and they left with 8, so now they've got to go and try and find the other 2 and blow them up before people return. Of course, that's just a guess at this point. That's just chit chat. We don't really know if that is true or not, but that is a good point. It is very interesting to see that they're loading up thousands of people and taking them out of the city. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the news in Belgorod and on into the frontline news across the entirety of Ukraine. We didn't get a lot of news in the southern front today, spanning from Velika Novoselka over to Zaporizhia, so this part of the front line was largely inactive as far as we could tell in video and picture evidence today, but the rest of the front line, of course, was fairly active, and we did see that Ukrainian units managed to have a fairly successful day today, all things considered. But before we get into any of that news, we have to go over the polls, and so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and for our very first poll, it says the U.S. has evacuated embassy staff in Sudan, and larger coalition evacuation is going to happen soon. What are your thoughts? 62% said great, we got them out. 8% said unsure. 19% said it's the best case for now, and 11% said bad, there are Americans still left. And when I heard this, I was glad to hear they got the embassy staff out, but it kind of gave me flashbacks to the Afghanistan evacuation, where we ended up taking away some of the soldiers and also people that were supposed to keep order while Americans were still in the area. It seems like this might have some similarities to it. Not saying that's going to happen, but we've evacuated the embassy staff. It's been completely closed down, and there's still Americans over there in Sudan. They say that they're going to try to use the UK military, I believe, along with the US, to help go in there and get the Americans and also the British and other foreign nationals out. But sometimes things don't go exactly as they're planned. So I'm going to say it's the best case for now, but I'm on the fence. Enforcer, what say you?
I'm going to say it's good to hear that we got the embassy staff out. Like Matthew said, from what we understand, there's around 20,000 foreigners inside of Sudan that come from other countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, and so on. So there is a sizable amount of people that are still left in Sudan. But then again, it's largely policy that those people just kind of have to fend for themselves for a little bit. Otherwise, the United States has to get directly involved, most likely in the conflict, sending in military forces to probably crush both sides in the end. And then we have this whole entire thing where we have to make a provisional government to try and transition the country back into democratic control so that we can get our people out. It is good to hear, however, that we did get the embassy staff out. That is excellent. Beyond that, however, it is a little bit scary to think of, because like with Afghanistan, there was just a lot of people, I think thousands of people, that ended up being left behind with really no way to get out, and the Taliban possibly trying to hunt them down and find them if they were still there, and we had to figure out how to get them out really without the government being involved. So hopefully a similar situation like that doesn't happen in Sudan. From what we understand, the Sudanese factions that are currently fighting aren't really interested in trying to lash out at the Americans or anyone externally. They're more so trying to vie for who will be in control of Sudan. So it doesn't appear that they'll become a target or anything similar if they do stay there, but it is still a very dangerous situation, and hopefully we can find a way to get all of them out. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Fairly interesting poll, by the way, and some pretty expected results. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says Ukrainian officials are in talks with Exxon, Halliburton, and Chevron to lease Ukrainian oil fields. And what are your thoughts? Kind of surprising to hear it, to be completely honest. 64% said, oh man, oil, Russia's finished. 14% said unsure, 10% said I'm indifferent on this one, and 12% said, this sounds kind of weird to me. And, the old meme goes kind of like something like this. If America hears there's oil somewhere, whoever the enemy is who's trying to mess with that oil supply, they are done. So it could be that if Exxon or any of these other oil companies can actually hammer out a deal with Ukraine's state-run oil company to lease those oil fields, that might be a massive incentive for the American government to continue helping Ukraine, even if things start going a little shaky. So I'm going to go with the 64%. I think I'm going with the meme answer here. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to also go with the 64% and go, oil. We love oil. The United States is a big fan of oil, as many of y'all may know. The United States, believe it or not, is actually the largest producer of oil worldwide. We beat out everyone in oil production. Let me pull up a chart here. Oil producing countries chart. Actually, let's put in a pie chart so that way I can show it in a cool way. So, let me find the most recent pie chart. We're not looking for, you know what? These charts, all of them are fairly old. They're all from like 2014. Let me see if I can go just oil producing countries list. List of oil production by country. And this is 2021 numbers, but the United States produces 11 million barrels of oil per day, which is around 33,556 barrels per day. Let's see, per oil production per capita. How in the world is that divided down? Because if it's per capita, wouldn't it be per person? There's obviously not 33,000 barrels of oil per person in the country. I don't really know how that figure is working over here. But once again, I'm not really that smart at math. But you can see that, of course, we outproduce the Ruski. We outproduce the Saudis. We also outproduce the Canadians. The Canadians are the fourth largest producer of oil in the world. Iraq is very close behind them. And China is below everyone. They're number 6 on the list. And so you can see, and this is a very interesting thing to point out right here, Matthew. Notice that Russia is the second largest producer of oil in the world. And oil has been a large part of the economic machine that the United States has been, because the cheap availability of oil has allowed our country to economically exceed everyone's expectations and be an economic superpower for decades at this point, really over a century. The Chinese, however, they do not have the ability, or they don't have the numbers right now to produce that same amount of barrels per oil. And so to get the kind of economic activity we have, they have to import the oil from somewhere else. And who would somewhere else be? It would be the Russians.
Russia.
And so
Yes, Russia relies heavily on those Siberian oil fields and the rural areas of Russia. That basically feeds the populated areas, from my understanding.
And I believe it certainly would. There's no question at all that they would. And now we can see why the Chinese are going out of their way to try and stay on the fence, or maybe even lean towards supporting Russia, because they do not want to upset that flow of oil. That oil is very important for the Chinese economy, because let's see, how much oil does China consume in a day? How many barrels?
Every time you say oil, I keep hearing like the national anthem, like playing in the background somewhere, like the U.S. anthem.
And I really could. I hear the sound of the anthem and also Blackhawks flying over the horizon. Maybe a few of them crashing. But anyways, the Chinese, right now, at least an estimate at the beginning of this year, are consuming about 16 million barrels of oil a day to keep their nation running. They only produce 3.9 million barrels of oil per day. The Russians produce another 10 million. So let's just say, in the purpose of simplifying everything, they do not export any of their oil. They consume all of it once it's produced in China. They have to find where the other 13 million barrels of oil every single day is coming from to keep their country running. So they have to go to the Russians, they have to go to really anyone that's selling the oil that will sell it to them, maybe even the United States, although I don't know how much or where we export to. And they have to, and of course they have to consume all of that oil, and they have to find about 13 to 12 million barrels of that elsewhere. Now let's ask this question. How much oil does the United States consume a day? Let's see, we consume about 20 million barrels per day. So that means that although we are the largest oil producer in the world, if we don't export any of that oil, we still have about 9 million barrels of oil that we have to come up with every single day to keep the country running. And so we, of course, have to get it from elsewhere. So we buy from the Saudis, we buy from the Canadians, the Iraqis. I don't know if we buy from the Chinese. I have a feeling that they're probably protecting their internal production of oil. And we also buy from the UAE and also Kuwait as well. So you can see right there a little bit of the economics as to how the oil is broken down. And now you can see why the Russians and the Chinese are largely friends with each other, or why they're trying to go out of their way to be friends with each other, because the Russians make a lot of money off of trading oil with China, and the Chinese keep their economy growing to where it can eventually rival the United States, because right now it's actually growing about 3% faster in GDP than our economy is within the next few years. So that is kind of the breakdown in resources as far as oil is concerned, about how important it is and how much is consumed per day. And this may be a U.S. attempt to bring Ukraine into NATO, and then to also make sure that oil production is found there. Because if oil production is found there, and it's in somewhat sizable numbers, let's see where Ukraine is on this graph right now. Dang, they're way down 59. There. They're below Cuba.
Wow.
Dang.
Are we going to get a discount on that oil since we're, helping to fight the war?
Maybe. Maybe
seems like we might.
But that's still very interesting, because I don't know how large Ukrainian oil fields are and how many barrels per day could be produced from Ukrainian oil fields. But the fact does still stand that the United States is always looking for ways to get oil or get more of it, and for cheaper, because it's a massive part of keeping our economy running. And so, of course, it would be inevitable that we would make sure to support Ukraine, because they will most likely become a NATO member. It's in our strategic interests in every single way, not just militarily, but also economically, to get them into the NATO alliance. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well by also trying to crunch down some numbers, which was very enlightening. I actually didn't know the numbers broke down like that, and it's still wild to see that the United States consumes 20 million barrels of oil per day, and I believe a barrel is like 55 gallons of oil.
I really don't know, to be honest.
How many gallons are in a barrel of oil? 42 U.S.
42.
liquid gallons. So if you multiply 20 million by 42, how many gallons of oil is that? 20 million. That's a lot. Times 42. 840 million gallons of oil per day are consumed in the United States alone. That's insane. Nuts. That is crazy. You know what? We're not gonna. You know what? We are gonna do number crunching. I wasn't gonna do number crunching. How many gallons of water are in an Olympic swimming pool? About 660,000 gallons. So let's divide the amount of oil we consume per day in gallons by the size of an Olympic swimming pool. So divided by 660,000. And that means that the United States every single day consumes nearly 1,300 Olympic swimming pools worth of oil every single day. And that is unbelievable. Like when
I know somebody's going to have a scientific answer for it, but like, where does all that oil come from? Like, I can't even visualize how much oil. Well, I know, but I can't imagine how much oil is actually under the ground to be able to like daily come up with that amount like consistently for decades.
But that is insane. And think about it. The whole entire system is incredibly fragile as well. Like the 1970s oil crisis shows. If that oil, I guess you could say, production is crimped in a way where it's reduced heavily, the whole world can just come to a stop for the most part. It becomes very expensive to keep things running. That's insane, really. And of course, you can see why a lot of companies would be going to Ukraine if they have any oil fields, being like, excuse me, can we drill here? And the Ukrainians are probably gonna be like, absolutely. So with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well. That was a very interesting one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, reports say that Russia allows Wagner soldiers to terrorize their communities after returning home, for the ones that do return home. And what are your thoughts? 73% said that's expected, they are parolees. 6% said unsure. 9% said, I don't buy it. And 13% said, that's strange, and why is that? And considering that a lot of those Wagner soldiers came straight from prison, and they were allowed some kind of pass to get out and fight for the government and then come back and have a little bit of freedom, I'm not shocked that they're back out committing crimes again, especially after they were just thrown in a very, very violent environment. That stoked up those criminal habits that they have, and now they're unleashing them back on the Russian population to give them a taste of their own medicine. So I'm not shocked, and I think that's expected. So I'm with the 73%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm not shocked either, because who in the hell would be shocked that when you let a druggy criminal junkie out of prison, they're gonna go and be a druggy criminal junkie out in the Gopnik slums of Moscow. That's not really surprising to me. So I would have to go with the 73%. Who would have ever thought that would be the way it is? So with that, I hope that adjusted that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one says, after Russia hit Belgorod yesterday, another bomb was found unexploded, causing an evacuation. And what are your thoughts? 59% said not surprising, they have huge incompetence. 30% said shocking, Russia didn't even know it. 6% said unsure, and 6% said maybe it was a separate incident. And kind of like the Enforcer was saying earlier, it seems like, didn't you make a point about there being only like one pylon on the bottom of the plane to drop a bomb?
Yeah, one pylon for one bomb.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe it was a separate incident. I kind of find it hard to believe that they dropped two of them by accident from the aircraft. If it was two from the aircraft, I would really seriously doubt that was an accident. It might be on purpose by the pilot, but I'm kind of unsure on this one, so I'm going with the 6%. But Enforcer, what say you?
In my opinion, that had to have been deliberate. I think they completely misinput. And this isn't the first time this has happened. I'll actually bring up a quick little historical story. They completely misinput the coordinates or something similar, and so they ended up bombing Belgorod instead of Kharkiv. Back in the day, during the Second World War, actually, I think this was before the Second World War, like in 1938 or so, some B-17s that were on a training bombing run in Oklahoma ended up bombing an actual town, like carpet bombed a small town filled with people because they put in the coordinates wrong, or the navigator got the coordinates wrong, and they ended up flying, like, I think a dozen or so miles away from the actual training target, and ended up actually flying over a town in the middle of the night and then dropping bombs on it. Fortunately for the people below, they were training bombs, so they weren't like full like 500-pound bombs, but it still, I think, killed like 2 or 3 people in the town. So it's not the first time anything's like that happened. Of course, it's the first time it's happened in this war where a Russian aircraft has done that on a Russian city, but I believe that these guys deliberately bombed Belgorod thinking it was Kharkiv, which is next level incompetence when you think about it, because they're not in training. It was supposed to be an actual sortie where they were going to bomb probably the civilian areas of Kharkiv, and they ended up bombing the civilian areas of Belgorod instead. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and that's our last poll, so we are moving on to our super chat questions. And the very first one we have goes to Alan Will 2, who puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much for the support, Alan. He says, Bradley's rock. They do well in Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support. And I would have to say, the one that's not the Morse code message, you hit that dead on the nail. Bradleys will rock in Ukraine. I have no doubt whatsoever. The Bradleys are going to do great. And I'm really, honestly, I don't know what's taking them so long at this point to actually get to the front lines, because we know they are in Ukraine now. So I can't wait for them to be on the front lines and see how well they perform against Russian MBTs and also Russian infantry groups, because I think they're going to do exceptionally well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope we addressed that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next super chat goes to Red Lamani, who puts in a $20 super chat and says, hello guys, LSA chef here, and specials for tonight. Mushrooms risotto with black truffles, Mediterranean sea bass lemon with capers, filet mignon, green peppercorn sauce, and homemade tiramisu. Enjoy for doggy bag roasted Putin.
Man, that stuff sounds good. It
does.
I honestly don't think we've ever eaten that well in our lives. I think we have like hamburgers and pizza normally. But I do thank you so much for being the LSA chef for tonight, Red Lamani, giving Pizza Man a run for his money. But I still thank you so much once again for the support, and also letting us hear some interesting dish ideas, because I'm certainly going to be seeing about having some of those in the future, if it's ever possible, because that all sounded great. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Red Lamani. I hope we addressed that fairly well, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the frontline news.
All right, and the final one goes to Telmed, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Telmed, for the support. He says, there were 2 bombs on Belgorod the other day. One exploded, and they are digging up the other one today.
And we did hear that, and I thank you so much for the support. And it's wild to think that the Russians, most likely, in my opinion, of course, this is not substantiated by any facts or anything, it's just, I guess you could say, logical deduction to me, but it's crazy to think that the Russians got it that wrong, that they ended up bombing Belgorod instead of Kharkiv. And so with that, I hope I addressed that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And real quick, a merciless plug for the like button. If y'all would like to, pun intended, make sure to hit the like button, because it does help this channel to spread out across the internet and let more people know what the Enforcer channel and the Lee Spring Army are up to over here. And so if you want people to come on in here and join the Lee Spring Army, make sure to hit the like button and also share it around with your friends. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the question segment and into the northern area near Tavorzhanka. We're near Tavorzhanka. We saw some Ukrainian BTR-4s on patrol. Of course, the BTR-4s are a heavily modified version of the normal BTR-60s and BTR-80s, and we can see them on patrol here. It appears that they may have also been somewhere behind the lines, maybe near a base or something, because they actually have a little rope set up right here. But still, very nice to see these BTR-4s on patrol. It's a Ukrainian-made indigenous vehicle, and hopefully, like we've seen throughout most of the war, these things will be able to give the Russians hell on the front lines. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on further down in the northeast, near the town of Komivka, where we saw the Atom unit hitting Russian positions. And we hear that song that they play whenever you have dementia. And so we're going to be muting that, and we can see the Atom group looking down at the Russians, who are moving around near what appears to be some kind of a vehicle. It looks like a BMP, actually, and they're now moving around in this series of houses, or this compound right here, which appears to be some kind of a Russian base. They're unloading boxes of stuff from the back of this BMP. And it looks like this may be a resupply run for this compound, and they're moving some of the supplies into the buildings. Of course, this becomes a prime target for the Ukrainian artillery and the Atom group, as these kinds of compounds help to keep Russian squads running very close to the front lines, and destroying them can seriously hinder Russian efforts in the area. The Atom unit is continuing to observe this unit. They're most likely calling in the artillery as the video is playing right now, and the artillery is starting to set up their pieces, put in the coordinates, and most likely going to start firing off their ranging shots soon. We can now see the first shot coming in, not that far off from the compound, just landing a little below it. They're most likely going to be adjusting the next round, landing way over the compound, so now they have a pretty good idea of where the coordinates need to be exactly. And now we can see them finally walking in the rounds right onto the compound itself, which is still right there. We can now see the fourth round hitting directly inside of the compound and starting a fire, most likely in the room that's being used to store the ammo. The ammo is now on fire. We do not know how many wounded Russian soldiers there are down there, but it does appear that a sizable amount of damage has been caused to the small compound or fob, and it seems as though the Russians most likely will not be able to use this much longer. They'll either have to move it to a new location, or that one's been wiped out in its entirety. Well, that's the end of that clip, but very nice to see that the Atom unit was able to improve the position of Ukrainian forces in that area due to destroying a small Russian fob. We're now going to be moving on further down the line in the northeast near Chernopolpivka, where of course things have been hitting off. And we've seen that the Ukrainians were able to hit a Russian tank today with an FPV kamikaze drone. We can see the Russian tank right down there. There is copyrighted music playing on this clip. We can see the tank firing, and we can see the FPV drone coming in hot, right onto the back of the turret, slamming into it, right there, and it actually had a cope cage on it as well. We now see the drone slamming into it. We see a small poof right there and smoke coming off the tank. And the tank was most likely heavily damaged by this, considering that the drone was carrying an RPG-7, I guess you could say anti-tank warhead, and it did hit towards the back of the turret, which is the weakest part of the turret's armor. It most likely did puncture straight through, either destroying the breech, hitting the ammunition, or maybe even wounding or killing the crew. All of those result in the tank being knocked out, suffice it to say. So excellent to see that another tank has been knocked out. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into the Kreminna battlefield, where we saw an unfortunate sight today that apparently a Ukrainian tank was lost in the Kreminna forests during the battle. It appears that the tank did not give up with without a fight, however, because the forest around it had literally been chopped down like a forestry company had come through to clear out the trees. When you see all of the rounds that had been fired over the course of this battle inside the tree line, literally covering the ground in lead and aluminum, or steel, or maybe even brass. We can see that the trees have literally been cut down by all of the gunfire that's been caused in this small area. Once again, showing how intense the battles have been. And we can see the poor Ukrainian tank over there with the blue and yellow of the Ukrainian flag visibly painted on the front of it that was destroyed in the course of this battle. We do not know the fate of the crew, whether the crew was knocked out with the tank or whether they bailed out and then the tank detonated later. But a testament to the heavy battles that the Ukrainians have been fighting in the Kreminna area, making sure to hold the line and ensure that the Russians do not begin a push towards Lyman again. We can see the turret right over there. And hopefully the introduction of better protected Western tanks like the Leopards, Challengers, and Abrams will be able to ensure that Ukrainian tankers will not have to endure this kind of, I guess you could say, punishment by Russian forces that they sometimes have to deal with when in the older Soviet models like this T-72B. We're now going to be moving on from this little bit of news in the Kreminna area. Of course, the Ukrainians still bravely holding that part of the front line, and on down towards the Kherson direction, specifically Vimivka, where we saw some very impressive trench art, and it is literally trench art dug into the side of the wall. And so here's the clip. You see the Ukrainian soldier carving away at it, and the cameraman's going to get closer here, and you'll be able to see the intricate carvings that this guy is making. You can see faces. It looks like some other stuff. I don't really know what there is other than faces. We can see an arm right there and the hand of a person, and it actually has hair and actual locks of hair and everything. Very impressive to see how skilled this guy is, and to think that the guy is probably an artist or something, and he's out here fighting on the front lines and got bored and literally started making a I guess you could say, an impression on the side of the trench. Really impressive, and great to know that there are amazing people like this in the Ukrainian army. And of course, this is what the nation of Ukraine is made up of, is incredibly skilled and talented guys like this one. And he's out here right now making sure to defend the country so he can go back and continue to do this kind of art, most likely in his normal life. But amazing nonetheless, and some impressive skill. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on down into the Bakhmut area, and it seems as though today the northern flank was largely quiet, at least according to video and picture evidence, and most of the fighting and most of the video clips came from inside of the city of Bakhmut itself. Over the past 24 hours, and let me get down here and see if the map did refresh today, and let me refresh it, and it appears that the map did refresh, so let's see what we're looking at. So over the past 48 hours for the large part, we did see that Russian forces were able to advance in most directions, and it appears that the Ukrainians have finally been pushed over the railway station after a brutal 2 weeks of fighting over it. It also seems that the Russians, much like predicted, which we did predict this about 2 weeks ago, did use the breakthrough in the northern area of the railroad tracks, which we also assumed would be the place they would attempt to break through, to then push the Ukrainian forces further out of town. We can assume that the majority of Russian forces and most Russian pushes onto Ukrainian lines will be coming from the northern area of the city, like we've been seeing over about the past 2 weeks. The Ukrainians in response are most likely making these northern-facing defensive lines the strongest out of all of the lines, trying to make sure that these Russian forces have a very difficult time advancing, as a lot of the Russians' attacking weight is being put in this northern direction. Going off of what we've seen over the past 48 hours, while the Ukrainians are still giving the Russians a run for their money, and the battle is going on nearly 7 months now, at least from the beginning of the second battle of Bakhmut, it does appear that the Ukrainians will eventually get pushed out completely. There's not a lot of the town that they control, something around 20% of it's left. And so we'll probably be seeing that the Ukrainians will start to retreat out of the Bakhmut area into Ivanivsky and then further on into Chasiv Yar, which is the highest point in the area and will be an incredible defensive position, also considering that there is a canal running north to south in front of Chasiv Yar, which always proves, like we can see down here, a large obstacle for Russian forces to try and cross or ford, as Russian forces are very, I guess you could say, poorly suited to fight over any body of water, no matter the size. And so with that, we're going to be moving.
Is it possible for them to, retreat like in a big, massive motion back to a safe position and then continue fighting the Russians, or do they have to basically get pushed out and fight their way back?
They kind of have to get pushed out, because you never want to start retreating without any pressure on the rear, on the actual lines that are pulling back, because historically in most battles, when a force starts to do that and they don't just slowly let themselves get pushed back into a new position, they usually get destroyed almost completely in that retreat. So they're most likely going to just have to wait until the Russians continuously push them out of the town and then into the fields and then into Ivanivsky, which will most likely be a small holding area to prepare defensives in Chasiv Yar, and then the remainder of the forces in Ivanivsky will move towards Chasiv Yar, with the Russians following right behind them. So
do you think it would have been better if they had gone ahead and made a tactical retreat earlier, or do you think this is better?
I think this is much better, because if they had made a tactical retreat earlier, they're giving up all the potential that this ground has for inflicting losses on the Russians. So I would say that it would be a lot smarter for them to be doing what they're doing now, instead of just giving up ground where they could be killing Russians and let them take it without a fight. The Russians have made that blunder throughout a large part of the war, where they'll give up territory like in the northern areas without even having the Ukrainians fight over it. Of course, they really didn't have an option. There was no more supplies up there, and soldiers were literally starting to starve, and they had no ammo. But they still could have tried to at least have a fighting retreat where they fought as they retreated. Instead, they literally just moved out of the area without even posing a fight through most of it. And that was a huge blunder on their end, because the Ukrainians didn't have to take on massive amounts of losses trying to reclaim it. The Russians just left, and it was by default a Ukrainian victory. So that would probably be the most beneficial thing for the Ukrainians to do here, is to just allow themselves to keep on fighting and keep on being pushed out of the city until they get back to Chasiv Yar. And so with that, I hope that does address that question. That was a very good one, Matthew. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into the city itself, where we saw the fighting still continuing, and a little bit of footage showing what the city of Bakhmut looks like at this moment. We can see fires burning in most of the apartment buildings, and all across the city, even further down in the distance, as we can hear a voice over the radio.
Валихан, два человека третьего организма. Це ті, які тобі ж я.
We now see the soldier once again showing us the outside world. And it looks like a hellscape out there with artillery still exploding just nearby.
Все, ми работаємо.
Well, that's the end of the clip. But it is absolutely wild to see the damage and devastation that has been brought to Bakhmut over this incredibly long and incredibly deadly battle for the Russians and also the Ukrainians as well. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into the center of Bakhmut, kind of close to the train station, where we heard firefights still continuing. We see this Ukrainian soldier firing his PKP. And these soldiers just hanging out waiting for him to finish firing. We now see the soldier ducking back in, and we can see this guy offering a snack and then eating it, and that's the end of the clip. But once again showing the heavy firefights that are going on inside of Bakhmut as Ukrainian forces still trying to inflict heavy losses on the advancing Russians. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip inside of Bakhmut, further to the south, where we saw the 93rd Brigade rolling up a tank to slam the Wagner point blank. And we saw that apparently in this title, the Wagner is now being referred to as Vaggies. I've never heard that term before, but a fairly interesting one. Anyways, we can see the 93rd's tank rolling on up. They see me rolling. They hating. And we can see it just driving through the city, of course. It's now drifting a right turn. Quite an impressive drift. He actually lined it up right on the road. The tank is still continuing to advance. Well, you see that something's caught onto the back of it, and now it's starting to fire down the street and towards the Russian forces.
Look, we got a Chinese bot in here talking about Russia. I love Russia. It's like, okay, you can love Russia from a distance. Bye-bye.
Zhang Fu says that because if he doesn't, there will be no more electricity tomorrow. Because he's from China.
Man, that's paying the bills for him.
Oh, man. Dude, he's over there sitting there thinking, how in the world will I have my crumbling corn on the cob concrete tomorrow if the oil's not brought in for the concrete mixer? But anyways... When you see them just slamming Russian forces all around them. Pretty ballsy for this tank to do this. We've seen many Russian tanks do similar and have a far worse fate, but it appears that this one is actually running its luck and doing fairly well at it, and also hitting a Russian ammo storage right there. But you now see the tank backing off and continuing to fire as it retreats. We now see it drifting another right turn. This driver loves to drift, man. This guy probably has Tokyo Drift playing on a headset in there. Or whatever. But anyways, great to see that the Fighting 93rd is slamming the Russians head on and somehow was able to get out of that completely unscathed. Probably because the Russians don't have any anti-tank weapons to speak of for the most part. Moving on into the highway perimeter near Ivanivsky, we also saw a picture of the soldiers of the 4th Brigade of the NGU Rubish. Very cool picture. And it looks like they're holding some kind of a Piorn or an Igla. I think this is actually an Igla. And you know what's probably even more shocking about this picture, Matthew, of it being of the 4th Brigade?
What's that?
The 4th Brigade is actually Operator Starsky's unit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is he in here somewhere?
I don't think he's one of these guys. Right now, I think he's at a training field somewhere. But parts of the 4th Brigade, and these are some of the guys in the 4th Brigade, are currently in the area of Bakhmut right now. And this is a picture of them. Of course, pick goes hard. Feel free to screenshot. But great to see that the 4th Brigade is also in Bakhmut and helping to defend the city as the Russians continue to send the onslaughts of waves against the Ukrainian forces to eventually try and break them and push them out. But really cool nonetheless to think that Operator Starsky's brigade, at least according to the picture caption, is in Bakhmut. We're now going to be moving on from the highway perimeter and on down towards the canal zone, where we saw the Russians being hit by Ukrainian artillery, courtesy of the 229th Separate Battalion and the 127th Kharkiv Brigade, the 56th Mariupol Brigade, and the 45th Artillery Brigade between Orikhovo, Vasilivka, and Dubovo, Vasilivka in the Bakhmut direction. That almost sounds like some kind of a dish that you would get at a restaurant. With that, here's the clip. We're going to start with a push-up. A push-up is an aerobic exercise. Anyways, you're going to use that. And we can see the Russian trenches right here. They're about to get hit by artillery here in a minute.
The Fitness Grand Pacer test will begin shortly.
The Fitness Gram Pacer Test is a multi-stage aerobic exercise. And you know what, Matthew? I just realized this. The title made me think this was new. This is an old clip, actually. I believe we showed this one yesterday, believe it or not, because I just remember these two guys poked their head up and then the shell landed up here. So, unfortunately, this one is old, so we're going to have to move on from it. If you do want to watch it, though, there is a link in the video description below this video where you can go and click on the day 423 map and see all of the clips for yourself. You can even go back to prior days, like day 422 and day 421, and go look at those little news clips as well. With that, we're now going to be moving on from the area of Bakhmut in that battlefield and on down into the direction of Orlivka, where we saw some snipers of the Omega Squad in action. Alright. Cool. I don't need a lawnmower ad song playing right now. That'll get us copyrighted. But we can see a sniper firing, and the Russian goes down. Very impressive. And quite a shot. We can now see another clip from later on. It appears that the infrared camera has been changed to orange, and we can now see them firing at a Russian there, and it appears that the Russian goes down again. Who would have ever thought that Ukrainian snipers are good at their job? We can now see them firing again. Say what?
Me.
Me. But we can see them firing again and getting another one. And we saw a video clip very similar to this one yesterday, and it shows how I guess you could say how diligent Ukrainian snipers are at doing their job and how many soldiers they're actually taking out with their efforts. With that, we're moving on into the Avdiivka direction, where we saw a Ukrainian soldier throw a satchel bomb into a Russian trench, and it appears to have been very successful. Here's the clip. We're going to have to mute that. When we see the Ukrainian throw the satchel into the trench, it then explodes a little bit later on. Poof! And I think they got him. I'm taking a guess that they got him, because of course we don't ever know for certain, but an explosion that looks like a 50-pound bomb blowing up in a trench, I'm assuming that if there are any Russians in there, they're not there anymore. Very impressive.
Man, that's a track in the background too. Come on, turn that up.
I mean, like, let's turn that thing up.
Oh, not really.
No, not really, not really. We didn't really need that. But still, great to see that they threw a satchel bomb at the Russians. And not only did they throw a satchel bomb at the Russians, they also turned a BMP-1 into a glorified satchel for the Russians inside, as they were able to hit one today and destroy it. We can see the BMP right there. And we're about to see it no longer. We can see that it got hit right in the engine bay, a fire starts billowing out of it, and that's about it for that little BMP. Very sad. Maybe they'll cry about it. Well, that's the end of that clip, and we're always happy to see that another BMP-1 hit the dust, of course, from a Ukrainian FPV drone, while I stutter my way through that like I'm some kind of an illiterate. With that, we're going to be moving on from the battlefield of Avdiivka, because of course there has been a lot of frontline movement or activity in that direction, and on down into the area of Vesely, where we saw that a Slavic Corps commander has been captured, and it appears that he'll no longer be leading the Slavic Corps. He may be, the core of the next prisoner exchange, if anything. I am Kachura Peter Ivanovich, born on November 23rd, 1973. I was taken prisoner in Avdiivka, Opotnaya, which is in the area of Vesely. I served in the 1st Slavyansk Brigade, 3rd Battalion, 8th Company. What do I want to say to my fellow countrymen? Guys, don't go to war. This is not our war. We are losing by all parameters. We have no artillery, no infantry, nothing. The defeated forces of Ukraine are defeating us in all directions. What is your military rank? Military rank, senior lieutenant. Since what year have you been fighting? I was fighting in 2014-2019. I resigned and was mobilized again in 2022. Tell me, how many veterans like you, who have been fighting since 2014, are still in the DPR army? Not many. And where's the main part? In the skies, probably. Oh. Uh-oh. That's it.
This guy seems a little bit dumb.
This guy seems a little silly. In what battles did they mostly die? In all battles, in infantry, in shooting battles. He's not asking like that. He's asking like what battles he died in, like the Battle of Donetsk Airport, the Battle of Avdiivka, the Battle of Marinka, Pisky. You know, he's asking about things like that. He's not asking like, oh, so did they get killed by shooting or artillery, or did they drown? Did they stub their toe? He's not asking like that. This guy took it that way. Mostly in
Playing
shooting.
dumb on purpose, I think.
Where did the 1st Slavyansk Brigade fight? Since October, we fought in Avdiivka, Opolnaya, and Vodanya.
Потери большие?
Yes, the losses are big. I see.
Понятно.
What can you say about the Ruski army? The Russian army, as they say, is the second largest in the world. No, this is not true. I don't know what it is. Maybe the 22nd?
Что в ней,
What are its
какие
shortcomings?
ты видишь недостатки?
There is no organization. The command is very, very weak. They throw us, go there, there is no one there. We go there, and there is an enemy there. I see. And that's the end of the clip. I have to say, this has to be the smartest DPR soldier we have ever seen so far, and it looks like he'll be doing himself a great favor, being in a prisoner of war camp. We're now going to be moving on.
He might be, what's his name, Lavrov's, like, long-lost son or something. Why is his face so long?
Man, why the long face? Why so serious? But with that, we're gonna...
He never changed that one look he had the whole video.
Man, that look, man, looked like I would get on the Moskva and smoke a cigarette. That's it.
Yes.
I would like a pack of cigarettes, please. But with that, we're going to be moving on down into the battlefield of Marinka, where we saw that the Ukrainians were able to capture a Kamaz Typhoon. Here are the pictures. As you can see, all of the tires have been deflated. So much for bulletproof tires. We can also see that the front is covered with a tarp. And many of y'all may remember we actually saw this Kamaz Typhoon the other day. And then we can see a picture of the top. And then we can see a picture of the inside, still filled with the same garbage we saw in the video the other day. But there was an actual picture of the outside of the Kamaz Typhoon that was captured. And it is great to see that they were able to get such a famous and well-regarded armored car, well, armored truck more like, that the Russians have been parading around in their victory parades for so long, and we can see that apparently while the armor may be, okay, the tires are not that great. With that, we're going to be moving on from the battlefield in Marinka and the captured Kamaz Typhoon that we saw there, and on into Vuhledar, where we saw the Russians once again dropped another bomb onto the Vuhledar area and have collapsed another high-rise. You can hear the car moving up and driving through the mud. And we see them showing us the burned out and destroyed building in front of them, where the center has largely collapsed entirely. You see, while this is a normal thing throughout most of the war, this is incredibly detrimental to the defense of Vuhledar, as these high-rises give the Ukrainians an ability to fire on the Russians miles before they ever even reach the city. If these high-rises are destroyed, this could start to greatly jeopardize the defensive position that Vuhledar gives to the Ukrainian armed forces, and they will be put on an even playing field, at least in terms of terrain and vision, as the Russians are in this area. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news, and once again, another bomb being dropped onto another high-rise in Vuhledar, and on into the area of Staromayorsk, where we saw that they were firing in enemy positions with a homemade MLRS today. This was interesting because it's like a Nebelwerfer. It's just a trailer with an MLRS rocket battery built onto it. Here's the video of it in operation.
Hey, sick trailer, bro.
Pretty sick trailer. And so that's the end of that clip. Once again, very interesting to see the trailer in operation. I guess when they say whip out the trailer, that's what they're whipping out. And so with that, we're now moving on from the Southern Front, because there's no other news to report from there. And we're also moving right into the speech from President Zelensky, as we have covered all of the news today. And so without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on the 423rd day of the war. Speech!
українці, сьогодні набули чинності 3 нових санкційних рішень щодо тих, хто вкладається в російську агресію і підтримує її. Передусім, це черговий пакет санкцій проти російського ВПК, підприємств, які забезпечують армію терористам. Цього разу до санкційних списків додано 322 компанії, виробники зброї, комплектуючих, подібного. Інші 2 санкційні списки – це фізичні та юридичні особи, які допомагають обходити санкції проти Росії, тримають майно воєнних злочинців та задіяння знищення свободи як на території самої Росії, так і на нашій землі. Наші санкційні пакети детально опрацьовуються, зокрема, щодо синхронізації з партнерами. Це одне з ключових наших спільних завдань абсолютно усіх, хто прагне швидшого завершення війни, швидшої нашої перемоги. Завдання – прибрати будь-які можливості Росії обходити санкції. Кожна російська схема, яка дозволяє обійти санкції, додає часу цій війні, додає можливості агресору. Відповідно, що жорсткіший санкційний режим проти Росії, що більше обмежень проти держави-терориста та усіх пов'язаних з нею осіб, проти всієї російської економіки війни, то швидше буде і завершення агресії. Я дякую всім світі, хто розуміє це. Важливо, що почалась глобальна обмежувальна робота щодо російської атомної галузі. Ця галузь не лише генерує кошти для бюджету агресора, але й дозволяє ставити у залежність інші держави, на території яких реалізуються нібито енергетичні атомні проекти. Будь-яка енергетика для Кремля – це зброя. Атомна енергетика для них – це також зброя, і саме це, до речі, відбувається на Запорізькій атомній станції, яку Росія використовує саме як зброю для шантажу світу, для шантажу катастрофою. І добре, що Британія, Америка, Франція, Японія, Канада утворили альянс, який має прибрати з глобального ринку атомну галузь держави-терориста. Окремо хочу подякувати сьогодні за підсумками цього тижня США і Канаді за нові пакети військової підтримки для наших воїнів. Дякую, друзі. Нідерланди, дякую за посилення ППО, за спільне з Данією рішення щодо танків. Дякую Німеччині. Є нові кроки, які забезпечать більше миру в нашому небі. Можуть бути нові кроки, які принесуть більше миру нашій землі. Очікуємо цих рішень. Дякую Естонії, Фінляндії за нові оборонні пакети. Дякую Словаччині за авіацію. Дякую Швейцарії за нові санкційні кроки проти російських терористів. Наступний тиждень у відносинах з партнерами готуємо не менш результативним, ніж цей. Кожен такий результат для України – це врятування життя наших людей, це здатність наших воїнів захищати життя, відбивати російські штурми, готувати українські активні дії. Дякую всім нашим воїнам, які зараз в бою, особливо тим, хто зараз в найжорстокіших місцях передової. Мар'їнка, Бахмут, Авдіївка, Лиманський напрямок. Саме там найзапекліше. Дякую воїнам ЗСУ, Нацгвардії, прикордонникам. Окремо сьогодні хочу відзначити підрозділ «Гурмоти мора», який воює в Бахмуті. Дякую, хлопці, за вашу сміливість, за результативність. Слава усім нашим воїнам, слава усім нашим героям різних часів, які боролися за нашу незалежність. Україна завжди буде вільною. Слава Україні!
So with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on the 423rd day of the war in Ukraine, and that wraps up our news summary for the night as well. I thank everyone so much once again for watching tonight's news segment. We're about to be moving into the question segment, where we're going to be addressing all of our polls first, all of the super chats second, and then as many live chats as we can in the third part of the question segment. But before we even move into that, I want to thank each and every one of y'all so much for watching the news segment. If y'all enjoyed, make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe and hit the bell button, as it does help the Lee Spring Army to grow, and it helps the Enforcer channel to keep on rolling. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the question segment. And what do we got for the polls, Matthew?
All right, and for our first poll of the final question segment, it says, were the bombs accidentally dropped on Belgorod by Russia? Was it an attempted or an failed false flag attack? 76% said no, it was simply incompetence. 15% said yes, it was a failed false flag. 9% said unsure. So for me on this one, I am unsure, to be quite honest with you on this one. It could have been incompetence, but at the same time, that's almost unbelievable if that was actually incompetence, because it was such a grievous error to drop 2 bombs from an aircraft on a city that's your own city and not to realize it, it seems like almost out of the question. But with the Russians, you never know. But Enforcer, what say you?
Mr. President, there has been a second bomb. No, what? Say what? But I would say that that is a huge embarrassment because that shows that, of course, the Russians did deliberately drop that bomb on Belgorod. It's not just it's not a coincidence that two of them were dropped. There's no way there could have been a malfunction on two separate pylons at the exact same time to drop two bombs on Belgorod. And so with that, hope I addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next poll.
All right, and the next one says Japan has ordered to shoot down a North Korean satellite if it falls into their territory. And what are your thoughts? 89%, the overwhelming option, was good. Strictly followed the order. 6% said unsure. 4% said allow some flexibility. And 2% said bad because that could start a war. And we haven't gotten a confirmed launch date of the North Korean satellite yet. I would assume it's probably going to happen maybe in the next week or two. But apparently Japan does have some intel, and they have decided to take a very hardline stance. If the thing is to fall out of the sky or somehow make its way over their territory, they are going to shoot it down, and that is a direct military order. So there's no question that they're going to try to do that if it happens. And honestly, I can't blame them. I'm with the 89%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree that the Japanese should certainly shoot down a North Korean satellite if it enters their airspace. The North Koreans are openly hostile to the Japanese, so there's no reason to allow the craft to fly over safely without being shot down. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one says, Ukraine says it needs 10 times more support to, quote-unquote, finish Russian aggression by this year. And what are your thoughts? 55% said that's fine and we should send it. 21% said, it's okay, but a little bit high. 7% said unsure. And 17% said, whoa, 10 times more support, that is too much. And on this one, I'm going to have to say, I'm going to side with the 17%. Because if I'm correct, I believe we have sent a total of $50 billion in military assistance to Ukraine thus far. And 10 times that amount, I simply don't think Ukraine needs that kind of money. That is way too much to send. And that statement was made by a deputy defense minister, so I'm not sure if it was an approved statement by the actual defense minister himself. But that did not seem like a good statement to make because I doubt we'll ever send that much money, and we really shouldn't. Because that's like almost a year's worth of our military budget here domestically in the U.S. And that would be wild to send that to a foreign country that much. But Enforcer, what say you?
Let's see here. 400 million in that's not the total. Who's given the most to Ukraine? Let's see. We gave since the beginning of 2022 to the end of 2022. Wait, hang on. Support Ukraine. That's up until the present day, according to the Statista, $71 billion. And we'll assume that probably around $60 billion of that was sent last year. If they say that they need 10 times the number of that, that means we're giving the entire U.S. annual military budget to Ukraine just over this next year to end the war. Now, I'm going to have to say this, all for supporting Ukraine, all for continuously supporting them, but giving them the entire military budget of the United States, I would have to say that's way too much. That's far too much. The Russians only have a military budget of $50 billion per year. And so it's not out of the question to say that just giving the Ukrainians something like $100 billion a year combined out of every single country to $150 billion per year would certainly be well than enough to be able to beat the Russians. There's no need to give them nearly $700 to $800 billion of support in a single year. Because, one, that is way too much money. There's really nowhere we can even find that. Because the U.S. has a total government budget of something like $2.3 trillion in a year. That means 50% of the U.S.'s budget, in terms of taxes, would be going to Ukraine alone in a single year. Way too much. That's completely unfeasible. And on top of that, they don't need that much either. And everyone's always saying, we don't need to just give them what they need. We need to give them things we don't need. But giving them $100 billion in a year is giving them, really, in all honesty, well more than they need. $150 billion would be extremely luxurious, especially for the war that the Ukrainians are fighting and the kind of country they're going up against. So I would have to say that is way too much. I would have to actually go with the 17% there. I just couldn't see that. And on top of that, it's not
Mark,
like...
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
Mark PFC of the LSA, he said, I bet they are right, though. If you give them the entire USA military budget, it would end fast. And yes, it should end fast. If you give them that much money, that thing should be over in a week. But I don't think money is the issue. You can't just like simply throw that much money at the problem and expect it to simply solve itself. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. That goes into training, how much manpower they have, and things like that. We do need to send them more support, but we need to be wise in what we're sending. Because my concern is when you ask for 10 times more support, an example, we've already sent at least 50 billion in support. It's like, what do y'all need that money for? Because nobody's really explaining exactly what they're going to use that much money for. And I don't see any rational explanation for needing that much money. But, Enforcer, what were you going to say?
I would have to say there's just really no way that they could spend all that money, because a lot of the money that's spent in the military here in our discretionary budget, which is around $700 billion per year, a decent amount of that percentage, something I believe like 20 to 30% of that, is in development and requisition programs, trying to figure out what new weapons will be. And so giving the Ukrainians that much, I mean, well, really, let's put this into scale. Actually, military spending per country. All right, so let me go to a list that will line them all up from top to bottom, which it appears that this one will do that. And then it doesn't really do that well. Okay, so here we go. So the United States is the largest military spender in the world, $778 billion per year. The Chinese are coming in second place at $252 billion US dollars. The Indians are the third at $73 billion. The Russians are the fourth. They spend $61 billion per year on their military, and that's the number that they're spending right now each year fighting the war in Ukraine. So if we give the Ukrainians 10 times the number of support that we've already given them, we're giving them the entire U.S. military budget of $778 billion in a year to beat a country that has a budget that would be 10 times smaller than that. Just in the math of how that works, it's too much. It's far too much. It's overkill at that point. And on top of that, you can give the Ukrainians enough money to field an army of 1 million soldiers, but do they even have 1 million soldiers? Do they have even an ability to train 1 million soldiers? You know, that's another question. And then what do they do? It's because if they still don't get Western aircraft, they can be given all the money they want. If they can't buy Western aircraft or certain kinds of technology, then that money just sits there indefinitely and no one can really do anything with it. So in my honest opinion, that is far too much. I would actually have to go with the 17% there. I could see them getting the same amount they've gotten so far, $70 billion in this year, or maybe even $100 billion or $120 billion at some of the higher end figures, but I couldn't see giving them $700 billion just from the United States alone, or really across the entirety of the NATO alliance. That's just a lot of money. So with that,
I think what the goal should be is we're trying to help Ukraine win this war decisively. We're trying to send them enough support to make sure that they do win it decisively, but at the same time, we're trying to, make it as cheap as possible as well, so that we don't go broke in the meantime. But one thing we have to remember is we're not trying to deck Ukraine out with the most high-tech, newest military equipment. We're simply trying to give them whatever it is that they're familiar with and used to be able to carry it out. So we're not trying to give them the Rolls Royce necessarily.
And also, Lester from above said, if USA's head gets any bigger, it'll explode. Well, I don't know what that's really in context to. We do outspend the entire world. I'm sorry, let me go and rephrase that. We actually spend the least out of everyone in the world. The $778 billion, it's just fairy tale money. But anyways, with that, hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have one more poll, and this one says, leaked docs say that China is building cyber weapons to take over U.S. satellites during war, and what are your thoughts? 44% said the U.S. probably has the defense, 40% said not good, China is leaping ahead, 7% said unsure, and 8% said, I'm mixed on this one. And I am actually with the 8%. I'm kind of mixed on it. Because a while back, we were told that China had tested a hypersonic missile. It went all the way around the globe, and it caught the U.S. Kind of by surprise. It's hard to tell these days exactly what the U.S. is aware of and what they're not, and I hope that this isn't another instance of being caught off guard. So hopefully we have a defense, but I'm kind of mixed on it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with that. I hope that we have a defense to that. I feel like we most likely will. because of course, whenever we hear about anything like that, the military goes into freak out mode, and then we make something usually 10 times better than whatever they have. So I'm sure that we'll probably have a defense to that in the future, or at least I hope we currently have a defense to that. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll, so we are moving into our Super Chat questions. And real quick, let me end that poll. And the first one goes to Hal Rose, who puts in a very generous $33 Super Chat. And thank you very much, Hal, for the continuous support, night in and night out, and we do appreciate it very much. He says, Enforcer, high-speed jets flying just above the treetops have no reaction time. The pilot headed or the first city he saw in the dark, and the co-pilot failed to confirm the GPS grid. And pick a question from the chat, please.
And I thank you for the support, Hal, and I would certainly have to agree with that story. That sounds like the most likely story, is that they were flying right over the tree lines, they spotted some high-rises in the distance with their lights on, and they're like, that's Kharkiv. And the navigator probably got the coordinates wrong and just agreed that that was Kharkiv, bomb it. And so they bombed it, and then later on they found out that that was not the right city, that was the wrong one, and they were 50 miles off target. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Hal, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to thank everyone who keeps this channel in mind and always supports us to keep this thing running, because y'all make it possible behind the scenes for this thing to keep on rolling. If it wasn't for folks like you, Hal, this channel would not be possible. And so with that, let's get a live chat.
All right, and the live chat question goes to Richard Parnell. He says, a question for the Enforcer. West Germany was technically divided when they joined NATO in 1955, and could that same situation then be applied to Ukraine?
Reread that one again.
Richard says, West Germany was technically divided when they joined NATO in 1955, and could that be the same situation then be applied to Ukraine?
I wouldn't really know how it would be applied, because Ukraine has not been divided into pieces. So I would have to be honest with you and declare ignorance on that one, because I don't really see how the West German situation being divided up into occupation zones applies to Ukraine being a solid country. So
I think he's trying to say that the already occupied areas of Ukraine that were disputed before this recent little war broke out, he's trying to say if that stayed the same and the rest of Ukraine got into NATO, how would that work?
I would say that that's actually not an applicable scenario, because West Germany, or the occupied areas of West Germany, were not at war with East Germany when they joined NATO. Ukraine is currently at war with the DPR and the LPR, which are illegitimate countries, the Russian Federation, which is occupying the rest of the territory, and so it is a different situation due to the Ukrainians actually being at war with the people who claimed the other part of the country, unlike West Germany, which was not at war with anyone when they joined NATO. And so that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support, Hal, and sponsoring that live chat.
All right. And yes, indeed, very big thanks to you as well. And the next one goes to Jose Diaz. He puts in a $20 donation. And thank you so much, Jose, for the support. He says, hello from Orlando, Florida, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, and all of my LSA brothers and sisters from your Puerto Rican brother, Gloria, Ukrainia, and Libre.
And thank you so much for the support, Jose Diaz, of course, the Commandant of the LSA Garrison in Puerto Rico. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. It's good to hear from you again, and it's great to see that you are helping to support this channel, because we're very appreciative of that. And of course, I hope you've been having a fun time down there, and I hope you've been enjoying tonight's stream as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Sharon Flynn. And thank you very much, Sharon, for the support. And she says, Slava Ukraine. And yay, Captain Morgan is my spell check. What in the world?
What? What? But
Isn't
I think,
that alcohol?
I think so. I think that is. But I do thank you for the support, Sharon. And very interesting to hear that Captain Morgan is your spell check. And also Slava Ukraini. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. Of course, we're greatly appreciative because it does help the channel to keep on rolling. And without viewer support, it wouldn't be possible for this thing to keep on going. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And also, I saw Forgotten Worlds say Article 5, the admission of Ukraine would put the entire NATO into war instantaneously. And if that were possible, it would, but Ukraine isn't allowed to join NATO until they are out of this active conflict, to my understanding. Even though some people, I think, want to put that aside, that probably wouldn't be wise because that's basically entering World War III. But Enforcer, what say you on that one?
I would have to absolutely agree. The NATO Charter doesn't allow countries who are currently involved in a war to join the NATO alliance, and even if they did, it would invoke Article 4 and then Article 5 immediately, because there would be no way for the NATO alliance, after Article 4 has been invoked, to say that Article 5 isn't already in effect. Because Ukraine would be attacked by a foreign power outside the NATO alliance, and they would be requiring aid. It would be an attack upon the entirety of NATO as far as Article 4 and Article 5 lay it out in the Charter. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Very astute observation. That's why Ukraine is not in NATO, and that's why Stoltenberg is going over there and saying you will be in NATO after the war ends, instead of saying you're in NATO right now. Because if they were, the World War III would have begun. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
Oh, if they were in NATO, we'd be fighting from the beaches and all that good stuff. That's my weak Churchill impersonation, by the way. I have to say that because it was so bad.
Yeah.
Probably nobody recognized it.
You see, my young, uneducated fellow, whiskey is the way to be the best alcoholic. I love myself a nice cigar and a good bourbon in the morning. But anyways, with that,
take it easy, Churchill. Lay off the booze. Okay, no, none of that. Let it go.
Tomorrow I'll be sober and you'll still be a womanizer. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Aquatico50, who puts in an $11 super chat. And he says, I go out of my way to not buy products made in China. I check everything I buy and will search different stores and search online. I have found so many awesome local companies by doing this.
That's really cool. And also great to hear, because I think it's very important for the United States here in the future, at least over the next few decades, to move themselves economically away from the Chinese, because the Chinese have certainly been trying to grow themselves into a little economic powerhouse over there, and a large part of that economic growth is because of the United States purchasing power. And so I would say it's great to hear that you do that, and I highly encourage that. If only there were a lot of folks like you, a lot of companies would have never moved to China in the first place, most likely. But with that, I thank you so much once again for support and sharing that little cool tidbit with us, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. We're greatly appreciative, and we thank everyone who does keep this channel in mind and helps to support it, because y'all are the only way that we can keep the thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and let me take down a live chat question I saw. It was pretty damn good. There we go. And our next super chat goes to Midwest Vikinger, who puts in a $10 super chat, and thank you very much for the support. He says, do you think after Ukraine restores her borders that we will see a DMZ like we see between South Korea and North Korea? And with things going what you think, the chances Putin may see a window?
I would have to say, in my opinion, I don't really think we would see a DMZ like there is in between North and South Korea, because one large factor that plays into that is population density. And there's a, let me pull up population density. Let's see, density world map. And so, let me go to Google Images and try and make this map bigger. So here's a population density map of the world, and as you can see, the largest population densities in the world are, of course, in East Asia, and out of that, the Koreas are very populated, actually considerably populated for that matter, as compared to Ukraine and Russia, and they share a pretty large border, and if you include the Belarusian border into that, it is incredibly long. It's thousands of miles long compared to the Korean DMZ, which is only, I think, 200 miles long, or maybe even less than that. It may be like 150 or so. And you have two incredibly large armies always on that border at all times, mining it, and it takes a lot of less resources, and there's a lot more population density in those two countries to support something like that. And between Ukraine and Russia, however, there really isn't a way to do that effectively. They're just, you would have to have one of the largest standing armies in the world to have a border in between Belarus and Russia as heavily militarized and as heavily protected as the Korean DMZ is. So in my opinion, I would have to say that's most likely going to be impractical for the Ukrainians to pull off after the war. But they could pull it off in specific spots around border checkpoints and things like that, and then build some kind of a border fence or a border wall throughout the rest of it. So that way it requires less manpower to work with. And it also would slow down an invading force because they'd have to blow up the wall and then clear a way through it. And then, of course, clear the other side out, make sure there's no mines, and then they start moving armored forces through. And also, of course, militaries can't really operate well off of roads. They have to have roads to be supplied, and the armor usually moves down roads the most effectively. So having a large armor push off of a roadway outside of what would most likely be a border checkpoint would be very hard, because they would probably have to travel another dozen miles or so to actually make it to a road, and by then the supply lines are so far stretched over where there is literally no infrastructure that they probably wouldn't even be able to make it that far. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well, because that is a really good idea, but logistically it would be very, very hard to pull off. Also, look at this. This is a height density map of the world's population. You can see where it's the most dense. The United States is like practically empty, and then Canada's non-existent.
You heard that India is going to overtake China like in the next few years in population by a massive margin.
I think they already have. India.
They're going to absolutely go extremely high in population, and China is going to start sinking according to predictions.
That is true. They're sinking because of the one-child policy, and there were so many daughters that were aborted in China that there is an exceptionally large number of males compared to females. So there isn't enough families that can be made anymore to where their population will not suffer. So they will decline regardless of what the, I guess you could say, consensus is going forward on whether it's a one-child policy or not. They did get rid of the one-child policy, and that's not even stopping the slowing growth. But this is something that's actually being faced around the world as an interesting rabbit hole. Japan is probably the country that is going through this the worst, and they actually have the oldest median population anywhere in the world. It's something like in the 40s or 50s. So a lot of their population is quite old by the world standards. And we can also see that the country of Japan, I believe it is the third largest GDP in the world right now, has almost as many people living in it as Russia does.
That's wild. Like, it must be, like, I've never been to Japan, obviously, but it must be really crowded.
It's got to be crowded. I'm just imagining that. And look at this. Like, if it's not a mountain range, there's people living there in Japan. Like, down here, like, look. Like, here in America, this would be considered an urban area. The whole entire thing would be considered an urban area. And this is what they call the Japanese countryside.
And see, that's what's wild, is they pack everyone with all this land they have. They pack everyone in these small, like, little condensed areas, and it's just, like, hyper packed in. Like, these houses and, like, apartments they have here, I have never seen a spacious house in Japan.
Oh, and the spacious houses are, like, millions. Like, they are, like, unaffordable for the most part. But, man, I mean, like, it's actually crazy.
Wait a minute. Enderslayer said in Japan you can get a free house.
What?
Where's that?
Wait, hang on. Can you get a free house in Japan?
I'll have one.
How to get a free
What?
house in Japan? Let's see.
There's got to be a catch to this.
Let's see how they explain that, because I'm calling cap on this one. Let's see. Article. Let's see. It seems to. How can a house be free in Japan, where the compared to the U.S., where it's around 250,000?
Totoro.
Wait, what? Totoro. Let's see. Is it a scam? No, it's not.
They're killing me, Totoro.
Yeah, no way that we always say Totoro and then they say Totoro at the beginning of this article. Like, people are always talking about this Totoro animal, and I pulled it up and I saw what it was. I don't know where we got our Totoro from, but it's not that Totoro. Anyways. Let's see.
People give away houses. It's like a peer-to-peer. People give away like houses when they're done with them type deal.
Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. This appears to be some kind of an auction, like a foreclosure auction. Because it says you can get them through an auction, not technically free, but practically free. So it's an auction, pretty much. When people can't afford their houses anymore, they foreclose, and then it goes up for an auction. That's pretty much the same thing we do in America. So this is a little bit of a farce, because technically, going off of that, you could get a house pretty cheap here in the United States as well if you always go for the ones that are foreclosed and auctioned off. But Japan is a really interesting country. Maybe one day we'll go there and see it for ourselves. It is very interesting. And it's it's a very interesting country. That's all I really have to say about it. I can't really say much more than that. But with that, we are on to the next one. Oh, and also thank you once again for the support, and I hope we answered that question fairly well.
Yes, indeed. And excuse me. And up next, we have a $60 super chat from none other than Beef Taco. And it's good to see you again. And he told me that he watches the stream, but he can't catch it live hardly anymore because he is busy working. And that is completely understandable, but it's good to see you again. And he says, it's been a while, and please buy your mom a spa treatment. I'm sure this last year has also been a major change for her, with both of you being celebrities. To Mom from Beef.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the support, Beef Taco, and helping this channel to keep on running. We would be more than happy to get our mom a spa treatment, but our mom loves to stay at home. A home is where the heart is, and we like to stay at home. It's nice here. But we will see about that. And also, that's one thing that we always kind of joke about in a way, kind of not so much anymore. It was funny when it first started, but now it's just kind of a thing, because people are always like, you're kind of a minor celebrity, and it's like, I guess. I mean, I've never really had a lot of people meet me in person that knew what I did. Usually people ask me what I do, and then that's when I tell them what I do. But yeah, I guess the way we are kind of like very, 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 very small celebrities, which is kind of a little flattering, kind of cool too. But still,
man, you'd be like the Z-list celebrity.
Yeah,
take that back. Actually, let's not make that a Z. Let's make that a Y-list celebrity.
You know what? We're not any celebrity. We're just doing our thing over
here.
Forget
all that.
Just forget all that. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Beef Taco, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because of course, folks like you do help this channel to keep on running. Y'all are the only way we can keep this thing running behind the scenes. And I know I give the spiel a lot, but I feel like it's a very important one to give, because we always want people to know that y'all are actually the ones helping this channel to keep on running. There's nothing else behind the scenes. Unlike the schizos say, we're not funded by the CIA. We don't have any sponsors. We don't run any ads. We don't have anything rather than y'all to help this channel to keep on running. And I got to thank y'all so much once again for always keeping this channel in mind and always making sure that we can keep it running. You know, and even as it's getting a little bit tougher as the war goes to keep it running, y'all are still helping to support this channel. I got to thank y'all so much once again for that, because without it, it would have never been possible from the start. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the spa treatment for our mother. And with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to none other than Marion Deemert, who puts in a $20 super chat, and no comment in the comment box here. But Marion, as I told you in the live chat, sorry for the misunderstanding the other night. I mistook you for someone else, and when you called out a bot, it looked like you were saying something different. So that was a misunderstanding on my part, and my apologies for it. And also, thank you very much for the support as well. And it's good to see you back. And Enforcer, what say you?
That's it. Well, thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemert. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support does say a lot, and it says that you want to help this channel to keep on running, and I thank you so much for that, because without folks like you, Marion, it wouldn't be possible for this channel to keep on rolling. And whenever I say that, I mean that quite seriously. And I got to thank you so much once again for making this possible. Funnily enough, we do have plans, and they should be in motion here in the future, to actually finally kickstart this channel on into making other stuff, rather than just Ukraine war news. We'll actually be doing videos in person where we're actually on camera. They'll most likely be... Actually, I was thinking, I don't know, Matthew, this might be a little out there, but maybe we could do not just gun reviews. We could make other channels where we do things like cooking, you know, like cooking up cool recipes, stuff like that, because a lot of people talk about food on this channel, and we were big foodies, so why not try and get into cooking a little bit, although we'd probably be terrible at it, you know, and do some other stuff. Because I was thinking, you know, the summer's coming around, why not have fun with it? Why not do a little bit of everything? I think it'd be cool. But, you know, we'll just have to wait and see. Matthew just heard that, and he went, cooking? I'm
on board with the gun videos and, like, other one. Cooking, that's a little left field, I gotta say. But, you know what? I'll film it. If you're doing it, I'll film it.
You know what? We're going to make it the best cooking videos anyone's ever seen. We're going to cook up historic recipes. We're going to cook up modern recipes. We're going to cook up recipes from the Lee Spring Army over. We're going to do a podcast. We're going to be in person.
Yeah, like Angry Penguin said, what about podcast, man? Yeah, podcast.
We're going to do podcasts in person on camera. The one thing, though, that I don't know how we're going to be doing it yet is that we kind of want to talk about random things, but it's kind of hard to talk about random things because there's really no way for us to make a thumbnail and title for that before we run the show. So I don't know how we're going to do that. I feel like we'll probably have to have some kind of a loose schedule or a topic that we're going to be talking about so that way we can have a title and thumbnail to run the podcast with. But I think that would be pretty cool. Because I'm not against that at all. We've been wanting to do that for a while. I mean, hell, the set did cost us like $5,000, $6,000 to make, and we only used it once. Although that was good in a way because it did help us to raise $64,000 that one night on the year anniversary, which made it worthwhile in its own right. But still, it's just sitting over there right now collecting dust, and we do need to do another podcast here soon. Sisui90 said politics podcast. No!
Oh, no!
Oh, man. Dude, I just heard that meme, that Japanese meme, if you know what I'm talking about, where it goes... Dun, 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 yo! Instead of it going yo, we just go no! But, man...
You know, I have mentioned to the enforcer, like, really early on, I said we should do, like, a separate channel where we talk about politics and, like, call it, you know, Enforcer Matt's, like, Fight Club or something like that about politics.
Oh, God!
I was, at that time, I thought it was a good idea, but the longer I have been on this channel, I realize how heated it gets when you talk politics, and I imagine that would turn into much more than a fight club. It'd probably turn into a Moida club. It would turn worse.
I gotta, you know what? I'm gonna let y'all know some of my honest apprehensions about getting into politics. A lot of the political commentators in the modern world have like no sense whatsoever on either side. Like they just say goofy stuff that doesn't really make any sense. And one of my big fears is that if we ever pick a political side on anything, we get thrown into one of those camps. And we don't want to get thrown into the camp on one side because it's filled with goofy people who make no sense in one direction, and I don't want to get thrown into the camp on the other side because it's also filled with goofy people who make no sense in the other direction. And that's also a big reason why I don't go into politics, because I don't want to be associated with any of those people, because a lot of what any of them say just does not make any sense. It can easily be defeated, all of it, with simple arguments. And like, gosh, man, I mean, and I think Matthew started to realize that as it's going on. That's why we've avoided politics heavily, really, is because I don't want to get thrown into a camp. And on top of that, the other big deal is that we are covering a war right now, and usually you don't want to bring up political divisions in a war, because then that means that this entire war and the support of the Ukrainians could be jeopardized, because now you start trying to divide up people into separate groups. And that's terrible. Like, if anyone doesn't understand it, the easiest way to die is to die from within. That's how most countries end up collapsing. The Soviet Union collapsed that way. The Roman Empire collapsed that way. Everything has collapsed that way. It's never an outside threat that really destroys a country. There's very few instances of that. It is inside fighting. And inside fighting will destroy anything. And it can destroy war support for Ukraine. That's why I don't like the idea of getting into politics much, especially when we're doing something as important and as sensitive as the war in Ukraine, because you can sit there and easily start to, screw over the war effort. Like, for example, when people sit there and say about certain members of Congress that they wish they could piss on their graves or something like that, that will start to obviously piss off people who do like those Congress members. And I'm not out here to say whether they're saying the right thing or not, but those people may be supporting Ukraine, may like those Congress members, and now you're going to run them off from supporting Ukraine and say, if you're not with me, you're against me, kind of thing. And now there's less people supporting Ukraine at the end of the day. And that's one thing that I'm certainly against, and that's also another massive reason. That's actually the number one reason why we don't get into politics. The number two reason is I don't want to get put into camps with other political commentators, because then I get stuck in that crap. And, you got to listen to goofy stuff that doesn't make any sense. Like one of the big
what's really wild is today there was a lot of stuff that happened. Like, for example, the evacuations from Sudan. There was not one single piece of coverage on any news channel about that. There might be, maybe later, but they're not covering stuff as it's happening like they used to back in the day. And it's really kind of discouraging when you see it, that you really can't, unless you're like hanging out on the internet like we all do, like on Twitter and things like that, and we get news from, other people that simply spend their days doing intel research. The news doesn't cover anything real anymore.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. I don't like it at all, because, you see, many of y'all, of course, have probably filtered through a news channel somewhere today, And most of the time, it's either Fox or CNN. You know, it's one or the other. And you don't see real news there anymore. Like, you know, probably what the famous one with CNN is the 2 scoops of ice cream, but everyone else got 1. Like, there were so many other things going on in the world that could have gotten some good coverage. Instead, you get that. Or you can go to another channel, you know, the opposite channel than the one that put out that kind of news, and you get something silly like, you know, so-and-so is trying to kill you if you walk backwards on a Tuesday in the middle of Nashville or something. You know, it's like, there's so much other things going on in the world and in the country that's actually worthwhile reporting. Like news, if I would find news so interesting, like real mainstream news, I would find it interesting if it went into things like agriculture and how well is the agricultural sector doing? Are there any problems there? Are there any shortcomings? And instead of just freaking people out, you know, like saying, like every year, this is always the big freak out thing to get people watching the news before Thanksgiving. We're running out of turkeys! And then we never run out of turkeys. There's always more than enough turkeys. And then they never give you a resolution like, oh, there were enough turkeys. You know, instead they just tell you there aren't enough turkeys. You eat a turkey for Thanksgiving, and then it just disappears. I don't like that stuff. And
hey, we're being broadcast at the local Papa John's.
Hey, let's go, local Papa John's. I love it.
Hey, shout out to Papa John's.
But yes, shout out to the local Papa John. I've eaten 40 pieces in 30 days. The quality's improving over there. But anyways, moving on from that. And also some people are trying to say, oh, I know where you stand now. I'm going to put you in a camp. Like, you know, one thing that I'm certainly trying to avoid because you say you don't like this. No. Well, here's one thing, okay? Like, let's be honest about it. Fox News hates Ukraine, and they want Ukraine to perish. You know, they'll find out any way to do that. But CNN, on the other hand, is no better because CNN will sit there and tell you the Ukrainians are on the verge of losing every day of the week. So both sides are just trying to freak you out one way or the other to keep you watching. CNN cares as little for Ukraine as Fox News does. Both of them care at nothing for Ukraine. Their whole point is just to keep you watching and keep ad space filled. That's their whole point. That's why for CNN, the Ukrainians are dying every day and they're about to get destroyed, like literally tomorrow. And then with Fox News, it's always something about we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine in the first place because for some reason the Russians are great people and they just love us or something. You know, that's.
You remember that? You remember that one guy from CNN that got canned and sent out, and he went out and started his new show, and he totally flipped his script like to a completely different side.
You know, like that's another thing that people don't understand. You know, just actually asking some real questions here about some of these people. How come all of the people in the news always have connections with higher up people? You know, like there's a certain guy who was. I guess you could say kind of brought into popular attention for a while from CNN, who had a brother who was a governor. How come he got the reporting position, I believe, after his brother became governor, if I'm correct?
I don't recall that part specifically.
I'll have to look into that one a little bit more. I'm not sure if I'm getting the timeline right there. And how come there's other people who say certain things about the government, but then they wear a CIA lapel every single time they're on air? You know,
man, they're hired guns. I tell you, they're hired to read a script.
You know,
That's
a lot of people don't get it. These people are not speaking their opinions. They don't believe in anything they're saying. None of them do. In fact, they may be the complete opposite belief of whatever they're saying. They're getting paid to say this stuff. We don't get paid by ad sponsors or by some higher up to say anything. We say whatever we want, and then you'll support us through a super chat. And you know, if you like what we do, you help us to keep it running.
Facts.
But you know. But that's the problem. That is the problem with news. I've seen a lot of people trying to say it's corporatization of news. I would say that's a pretty good point. Yeah, I would say that is. Because you also notice a lot of the news companies have been bought out by some guy somewhere, you know, and he wants a certain thing pushed. You know, it's not all the same guy. It's some different guys. But then they all push their thing, whether it be truthful or not. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. And Tom Exman said, ooh, politics. I was keeping that right down the middle, bashing them both, and really just trying to point out a lot of critiques. I never make a political stance or a political side on anything. But yes, those are some of my critiques of mainstream news. Now one of them will probably be emailing us now that we've said that. Never emailed us before. They'll probably want us on their show, and I'm going to say no. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $12 super chat from Epic Trains Canada, and thank you so much for the support. And they said, building on the DMZ comment, would it be worth it for Ukraine to wall up their border with Russia or perhaps dig a river so that tanks can't cross? And what's your opinion? And Igor and Slava Ukraine.
Igor! And thank you so much for the support. Good question, by the way. I would say that the Ukrainians, a ditch would pose kind of a small threat, really. And that's one thing that we've seen in the Zaporizhzhia front is that the Russians have dug anti-tank ditches, whip out a bulldozer, bulldoze a little small part of it. There you go. You got a crossing. And so the trenches don't really pose much of an issue. It's really more so making sure that when you get closer to border areas, there are less paved roads. That's really the big deal, security-wise, because if there is a small amount of paved roads, there's a small amount of choke points where the Russians will have to push through, and then you can build up the defenses heavily around those paved roads. That would probably be the best way that border security could be arranged for Ukraine, but in all honesty, there really is no effective way. It is a massive plain, and in most parts of the Ukrainian-Russian border, there isn't really a clear distinction geographically or any kind of geographic boundary where you could physically see that Ukraine ends and Russia begins for the most part. It's kind of just drawn up in the fields and plains, and so there really is no way to defend a border like Ukraine's from Russia or for Russia to defend from Ukraine, at least financially or feasibly. Really, they just have to defend the major strong points like the cities near the border if a war was to break out. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in an $11 super chat. And thank you very much, Margaret, for the support. And it's good to see you once again. She says, for the quote-unquote, why Mr. Corgi is so awesome video, and take a juicy live chat question, please.
Now, that's something I would love to do, actually, is a little Mr. Corgi video. I love Mr. Corgi. I also love Sheba, too. Y'all have never really met Sheba, so y'all don't get to know Sheba well. Sheba is violently hostile to strangers. Well, actually, she's not, like, vicious or anything. She's just very skittish of strangers. Does not like them at all. But she loves people that she's gotten accustomed to. Loves them to death. Even sweeter than Mr. Corgi is, really. But I would love to make a video on those two dogs because they're precious. I love them to bits. And who doesn't love corgis? I love corgis. And you know, I'm not biased or anything. I just have two of them. But I love corgis. And so that's a great idea. We might actually try and make something like that in the future. Maybe on another channel. We're going to start making offshoot channels most likely because we don't want this one to get cluttered with everything. This one will most likely move on to be our news and gun review channel, and then we'll make second ones if we ever offshoot into anything else. Also, this will be the podcast channel as well, but if we do cooking, there will be another channel for cooking most likely. If there's ever a gaming channel, which is probably the most unlikely of them all, we'll have a separate channel for that, and so on. And the dogs will probably fall under some kind of a life podcast. No, not a life podcast. What the hell is that called? A life blog kind of thing, and then they would go on their own separate channel. Yeah, kind of. But I would absolutely love it. And I know a lot of y'all would love to see Mr. Corgi again. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, and we'll make sure to grab that live chat right now.
And the live chat question goes to Gregory Pennick, who says, does the oil justify sending F-16s to Ukraine?
The oil, yeah, I would say yes. The oil justifies, depending on the amount. If we were talking, and of course I'm saying this talking about oil solely, I think F-16 should be sent to Ukraine at some point. But if we're talking specifically about oil, depending on the amount there, and if it's a large amount of it, we should certainly send F-16s to Ukraine. Talking about it in general, just including the oil in as another part of the equation, I would say the F-16s should have been provided already, but it is still taking time. And now that there is oil there, that should be another added argument to why F-16s should be sent. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support in allowing us to answer that live chat question. That's incredibly kind of y'all, and I thank y'all so much for always doing that for other Lee Spring Army members, so that way their questions get answered. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again.
All right, and oh my goodness, somebody asked, why is Sipes not here tonight? I said, he's not here because he is ill. He's sick. Some people are saying, yes, we all know Sipes is sick, LOL.
Oh my
and
gosh.
T. Hansen said, iller than normal or just ill?
Dude, he is the illest.
Yes, it has a double meaning, actually. But no, hopefully Sipes does get better soon. I'm not sure exactly what he had, but of course, you know, those bugs do get around. But hopefully he gets better very quickly.
And yes, I would certainly agree. And so with that, we're we're on to the next one.
All right. And the next one goes to WL, who puts in a $10 super chat and says, do you believe that Ukraine will receive F-16s this year? And for me, I would say that's a no.
I'm also going to have to agree with that. I'd have to actually say no, because it seems like no matter what, we're very adamant on not sending modern Western aircraft to Ukraine. I really don't know the explanation. No one's really giving us the theory or like the method behind that madness, but it appears that they will not be sent. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also to explain why I said no, Ukraine was expecting an answer at Ramstein, and they publicly stated that they were going to get the decision there. So I would imagine that if they got a yes, they would probably go ahead and say that now instead of waiting. But of course, we don't know exactly what was talked about. But I simply don't think it's going to happen because of that reason. But up next, we have a $10 super chat from CK Bold, who says, take a live chat question.
And thank you so much for the support, CK Bold. And we will make sure to take a live chat question. And so with that, what do we got?
And this one goes to Ian, who says, do you believe the Western tanks or the Bradleys will be more effective at destroying Russian armor?
Good question. It depends on what kind of weapons we would send for the F-16 to use. If they were Mavericks, oh totally. If they were GBUs, oh totally. if they're dumb
Wait,
bombs, oh, you don't know what a Maverick and a GBU is?
I think you got the question wrong.
You said the Bradley or the F-16 would be better, right?
No, he said, do you believe that Western tanks or the Bradleys will be more effective at destroying Russian armor?
Oh, the Bradley.
I was about to say, where'd the F-16s come from?
The Bradley actually would be probably better. That sounds weird because it's a light tank, it's not an MBT. And I think my answer has actually changed from a few weeks ago. Reason being is that the tanks will most likely never face up against a Russian tank. The Bradleys, however, most likely will, because they're going to be considered lightly armed compared to an Abrams, and so the Russians will most likely move armor into the area to try and fight the Bradley. And the Bradley has tows, which have a longer range than a Russian tank's main gun, and also are more destructive as they explode from the top down, if it's a TOW 2B, and so that it will, of course, detonate a Russian tank immediately, like it's some kind of a firecracker or something similar. So in my opinion, I would honestly have to tell you, I think a Bradley would be more destructive than an Abrams, at least in this war. In prior wars, like the Gulf War, the Abrams did prove to be more destructive. Well, really, MBTs in general proved to be more destructive than the Bradley, or light tanks for that matter. But in this war, I actually think light tanks may prove to be more destructive than the MBTs will, due to the Russians probably being more willing to send their MBTs to engage the light tanks, and the light tanks have an upper hand advantage over those MBTs due to the tows. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well, at least based off of my opinion. And I always have to say this, we don't say this a lot anymore, but I'm not a complete expert on everything. Never want to make myself to be an expert. I do deride experts, however. I always deride them. But I'm not an expert myself, and I'm basing all of this off of historical knowledge and information. So take that for what it is. Take it for a grain of salt, because I'm not the go-to know-it-all for everything. But that would be my opinion on that. And so with that, I hope that does answer that, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to John Webster. He puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, John, for the support. He says, yesterday, you said you'd no longer be reading the subtitles on translated videos. I often listen to the show while I'm working, so the read-offs are greatly appreciated.
And I thank you for the support. And we actually decided after I said that to immediately rescind that and start reading off the subtitles again, because it did seem that actually a lot of people really did enjoy us reading off the subtitles, although I thought people didn't, because we, of course, have a lot of haters come through, and a lot of them go, oh my god, this guy loves hearing himself talk. And I'm sitting here thinking, maybe that's coming off that way, so maybe I'll stop reading the subtitles. But then a lot of y'all actually said y'all enjoyed it. So then I was like, okay, well, we'll actually bring it back. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Sharon Flynn yet again, who puts in another $20 super chat. And thank you, Sharon, once again for the second, I believe a second super chat, but we appreciate it very much. She says, I get it, World War III, but really, why don't we make Russia a fourth world country? For real, wipe those bad guys off the face of the earth.
Oh, well, probably a couple of things would weigh in on that decision. One, we would probably be committing genocide at that point if we wiped them off the face of the earth, which is frowned upon. And Yikes. I mean, I get where you're coming from with that, but I'm sitting here and thinking what that would actually entail, and that would be nasty. That would probably be one of those things that traumatizes the world over, and we would be talking about for centuries afterwards. But I get what you're saying, because they do cause nothing but rough things in the world. They're a destabilizing force, and also they're a rival of the United States, but one of the most minor rivals we have right now. You know, excluding the nukes, adding those in, they're actually still a bit of a serious threat. And I definitely get that. But there's no real way for us to do it. The best thing we could do is to try and meddle in Russian affairs and eventually have their government overthrown and have one more suitable to our interests put in place. But until then, there's not really a lot we can do. But still, I do thank you so much for the support and also helping this channel to keep on running. Also, like that you're an Arsenal fan. I think we've seen the Arsenal Stadium. Arsenal Football Club in London. I swear we have. Yeah, I believe we did, Matthew. We were on the... I think we were on the A1, and we drove past it. Let me drop us down right there, because I think we can actually see that stadium. No, it couldn't. No, it wasn't this. I think it was actually a motorway heading out of London. Where in the world's the motorway? The M1! I think it was this right here, actually. Let me check this.
Well, the 1M was a really good car. Like, they only made it for a few years, but it was great.
I don't even know what that is. I'm sitting there trying to think of like
somebody does.
Someone probably does, but I think we did see this at some point. I don't know when. I think we actually saw this on the plane. But it is a really interesting stadium. And wait a minute, what? The club has strived to foster a sense of pride, desire to be a cutting edge of. Why in the world are they standing near artillery shell? Yes. All right, bruv, we're going to kick the football into the goal and then blow up some Germans with some high explosive. But I don't really know what's up with the statue here. And then the statement behind it. I don't know what that is. But anyways, this is a really cool stadium. European football is really interesting. I'm not really, of course, don't take sides with clubs or anything, but I do know what Arsenal is. And really cool to know that their stadium is right up there. Yes, we did actually see that from the plane. I'm remembering it now. It was certainly from the plane. What's wild, Matthew, is that did you know this? That in the 1850s and the 1860s, just to show you how quickly cities have grown over the past about century and a half, Hyde Park was actually on the very edge of London. Like, London ended about right where my mouse cursor is, right here, on the northern end of Hyde Park.
Wow.
Yeah,
that means not coming on then.
Yeah, so to add a little bit more interesting facts to this, when the London Paddington railway station was built, which we've actually been in before over there, it was on the very edge of the city. It was like in the middle of nowhere pretty much, and now look at it, it is in the dead center of what is considered to be London.
That's pretty cool. You know, a lot of that urban sprawl.
A lot of that urban sprawl, and that's even in a country that doesn't really have urban sprawl. Unlike America, that has endless urban sprawl. Like, let's go to New York. Actually, this is really dense when you think about it. New York City is probably the densest city there is. Not in the people, but in the population density. Atlanta, on the other hand, has got to be the biggest sprawl, because look at it. It just doesn't end. Like, all the way out here, the suburbs are still going. All the way out here, and
that traffic is horrendous in Atlanta. Like, absolutely worst drivers, worst traffic. It's like mayhem, like bumper cars over there.
It is hell on earth in Atlanta. Like, seriously, like, just driving there is hell. I don't know what it's really like to live in Atlanta. I'm glad that we don't, because I think I would seriously lose my mind if I had to deal with that daily traffic. The traffic is horrendous. Like, I don't know. Like, a lot of people say that Houston's bad. I've never been to Houston to know, but it's bad in Atlanta. It's terrible. Like, you can literally be stuck in traffic just moving from one end of the city to the other for like 6 or 7 hours. It's unbelievable. Anyways, Trista agreed. Atlanta is worth traffic. I'm glad to know that someone agrees with this, because Atlanta is horrendous. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support, Sharon. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to John Webster yet again. He puts in another $10 super chat and says, have you gotten any new cool stuff in the mail?
We haven't yet. We did hear that there was something that has come in the mail. I checked the P.O. box. It was not in there. We now have a USPS tracking number that we're going to go tomorrow and try and pick up. So we'll see if we did get anything else new in the mail. And of course, we love to get new stuff in the mail. It's really cool. And like, they're neat little gifts that we get. And I'm a huge fan of it. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Rad Doctor, who puts in a $10 super chat and says Ryan Macbeth had really good insight as to what happened with the bombs dropped on Belgorod. He said that they were likely glide bombs that failed to deploy their wings and dropped right away.
And I thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us. But I do have to ask this, not of course, whenever let me just sit here and slow down for a minute, okay? Because I have to go through this whole spiel here real quick. Now, I haven't really heard a lot about this person, Ryan Macbeth. Okay, so I don't know anything about him. But when hearing something like that, how did he get that information to be able to say something like that? And I'm not dissing on the guy or anything. I'm just asking here. How in the world would he know they're glide bombs? Because I have not seen, and maybe he has footage. I don't know. I haven't seen any of his proof or watched his video or anything. But one of my main questions would be, how in the world can he tell it's a glide bomb? Because in the video footage we saw, all we saw was a mass flying towards the ground at high speed and then slamming into it and then exploding a while later. Even still, I'm still trying to sit here and think about that. I don't know why in the world would they be dropping a glide bomb so low that you could hear the Su-35 literally roaring right overhead over the city? That thing wouldn't be gliding far anyways. It'd probably just glide maybe a mile or two and then slam into the ground anyways. So I thank you for the support and I thank you for sharing that with us. I will certainly look into it, but I have my doubts that they were glide bombs, considering that they were flying so low over the city in the first place that you could hear the jet. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, though, and sharing that with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to David Malone. He puts in a $10 super chat and says, I've only been a civilian contractor here in Canada, but almost became an Army officer before I became a teacher. And what are the chances I can become an LSA lieutenant?
Well, the
Lieutenant Dan,
the chances are high, and you are now a lieutenant. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. Congratulations on your commission of being a lieutenant, and welcome to the Lee Spring Army. Everyone's a member of the Lee Spring Army as long as you subscribe. That's really the only criteria to being in the LSA. And then we don't really care that much if people call themselves a general or a lieutenant or anything, because it's just the Lee Spring Army. It's for fun. It's not like we're trying to have a power trip or anything in here. There's no hall monitors here. So thank you for the support. Congratulations on getting your commission right there. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running, because your support does help this thing to keep rolling. And of course, it means a lot to us, especially in current times like these during this part of the war. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and the next one goes to Russ Rizzo, who puts in a $10 super chat and says, is everything we give Ukraine part of the Lend-Lease to be paid back someday?
I don't know. I think some of it was just handed over for free. And also, when we say we give them $2 billion of military support, I believe we're just writing that $2 billion off as government spending. So I don't think a lot of it will have to be given back at the end of the war. Maybe some of it will. Probably the HIMARS will be. But everything else we may just give over to them and let them keep. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much for the support. And I see a lot of people saying good things about Ryan Macbeth. Once again, never watched him before. It's not a diss against him or anything. I don't really watch anyone on YouTube because, I'm very busy. So once the stream ends, I'm just back to doing my own thing. But I will look into it and see, because maybe the guy has some really convincing evidence or proof that they were glide bombs. I still feel like, in my opinion, with what we've heard and what we've seen about it, it would most likely be a little far-fetched to think they are glide bombs, but, I'll make sure to go over there and watch it and see. So nobody sit there and say that I'm, blasting the guy or anything, because, it becomes very tiresome to try and give a leniency to things I hear and say, I don't really know about it, and then people want to take it as me, roasting someone or trying to beef with them, or now I hate people who support that channel or something like that. That becomes old, very old, because I think we had something like that happen a couple of days ago, and people went mental over it, literally mental, and it really makes it hard to run the channel, honestly, when you get beat down by dozens of people who just want to take your words out of context and then sit there and act like you're saying something you did not say. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Don't bash me for that. I'm just, saying it doesn't really sound like it makes sense to me right now. I'll go watch this video. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next super chat goes to Hal Rose, who puts in a $10 super chat and says, Enforcer, how about a quick poll? Should the world respect the sovereignty of nations? Yes or no? And I'll say absolutely yes.
I would say yes, but let's throw up a poll and see if people believe we should. Immediately annexes Canada after the stream.
Yes.
Oh, man. But with that, we're going to let Matthew set up that poll here, and also... Bless you. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because, of course, the support helps us to keep this thing rolling, and we got to thank everyone who always thinks about this channel and helps us to keep on running, because y'all's support really does help in keeping this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Sharon Flynn once again, and she is actually leaving for the night. So good night to you, Sharon. And she puts in a $10 super chat once again. She says, "Hell yeah, go you Gunners, and hail Wrexham."
And thank you so much for the support. That's some British football talk right there. And I do thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. But sadly, I don't really know any more than I think Arsenal and let's see, what's the other one? Arsenal and like KC, I think it is. I don't know. I think
which was the one owned by the oligarch that they forced him to sell?
I don't know that one.
Was it
Chelsea? Yeah, I think it was Chelsea.
FC?
Yeah, I think it was Chelsea FC. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Sharon, and helping this channel to keep on running, and also shouting out your club. And also another thing, speaking of clubs and things, where in the world did Fly Eagles Fly go? Fly Eagles Fly has disappeared. We used to hear about the Eagles like every week. Now, nothing. We miss Fly Eagles Fly. Where's Fly Eagles Fly? Fly Eagles Fly, come back, fly back. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have let me add this to the spreadsheet real quick. We have an $8 super chat from White Lightning 777. And I do apologize for blowing everyone's ears out, by the way. I tried to turn away when I sneezed, but I think the mute button didn't work when I did it. Obviously not. But White Lightning 777 says, how significant is it that Ukraine captures Crimea before Donbass?
It is quite significant. Let me think about that real quick. Reread that one again.
All right. And also, Gary, are you not listening? He said, who came up with that stupid poll question? We literally just called out the super chat with it in it. What a pointed way to say. My goodness. What's your manners, sir? How dare you, sir?
Hold up a minute. Who said that now?
Oh, is that a real question?
Yeah, who said that?
Gary.
Gary, we're running questions that were answered to us in the super chat. We always make sure to respect the super chats, because those people help us to keep this channel running. And if they want a poll run, we're going to run one. And so, I hope that answers your question fairly well. Of course, I didn't mean to get hostile there, and I hope you didn't take that personally or anything. But that's why we run it.
Order.
The right honourable gentleman will now address the chamber. He will refrain from calling him Dodgy Dave. No, I won't, get out of here. But anyway,
call him out.
Call him out.
Hey, you watch your mouth too, good sir.
That's all, man. Dude, honestly, man, I've got to say this. The House of Commons, watching any session in the House of Commons is like pure entertainment. Like we're not going to go over the figures in the House of Commons, but it is raw entertainment at any given moment. If anything, it is entertainment. So with that,
I think we lost it for a moment, but anyways, back to the super chat. I think you'd answered the one from White Lightning 777. How significant is it if Ukraine captures Crimea before the Donbass? You answered that one already.
Oh, wait a minute, no, I actually haven't. I actually asked you to reread that one. It's very important for the Ukrainians to capture Crimea before Donbass, because the Donbass is on open ground and the Russians will be able to continuously supply that. If they take Crimea, they're taking the strategic asset that the Russians started the entire war for, which makes them holding the Donbass practically irrelevant at that point, and so they most likely withdraw. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again, White Lightning 777, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, I'm seeing a lot of people in here that LOL. People are going LOL. Let's see. I got to read some of the responses to what we did there. Let's see. LOL. Big letters. Gary. Let's see. I cannot understand half of them. Watch thine tongue. Someone said, okay, no more meth. Who took meth? Like, no one took meth. Let's see. And Gary went quiet. Gary went quiet.
Gary, would you like to scrutinize? I said, would you like to scrutinize? How dare
They
you?
don't want to scrutinize me. They don't want to scrutinize. Thank you. Moving on to the great supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies. But
He had to have that line prepared.
Yeah,
There's
he
no
had
way he thought
to.
of that on the spot.
There's no way. I doubt that he came up with that on the spot. I seriously am. But anyways, with it, with that, we lost it there for like a good minute. But with that, we're on to the next one. I hope that Gary did not take that personally. But we just don't know why people are so pointed about things that we've been asked about.
Yes.
All
All we ask is that you be polite and not try to offend us, you junior minister, you.
Why are we going British? But the one thing we ask is that people always remain polite, because people don't like it when we're rude to people. I don't like it when we're rude to people. I like it when people are nice and civil. Folks in the live chat, us to others. But if people do cross that line, we don't make any effort at all in still being civil. Because civility has been breached. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, to address the very contentious poll that has turned quite contentious, should the world respect the sovereignty of the nations? 95% said yes and 5% said no. I guess the 5% must be Russians, because they clearly don't respect the sovereignty of nations, or they could be Chinese from China. Either one, but I'm with the 95%, 100%. Unfortunately, what say you?
I would agree. I would say that the sovereignty of a country should always be protected. It should always be defended, because it is the way it is. Now, some people always go, but wait, and I'm going to say this real quick, because this is an argument that I always hear, but wait, what about the Kurds? Because the Kurds live everywhere in northern Iraq, northern Syria, and also southern Turkey, or southern Anatolia. To that, I would say, what about the million Greeks that were taken from the west coast of Anatolia, and then transported back to Greece, and about the million Turks that were transported from Crete and other islands in Greece, and then sent back to Turkey? And what about the Germans that were forced out of places like East Prussia, and also the former German holdings that had been German for hundreds of years, and then were pushed into East Germany by the Soviets, and then the Polish that went and repopulated that place right after? And what about the Polish parts of Ukraine that, like Lviv and also Brest and also Vilnius, that were once Polish, that are no longer Polish and filled with Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Lithuanians? There is, as far as it goes with cultures being divided up in weird ways, and a country not having a culture to itself, there are never-ending examples of that around the world. Every single country is an example of that, actually, believe it or not. And so I just say, let the borders stay the way they are, because it is a hodgepodge out there. It's a real mess when you really look at how the cultures are laid out, how they're divided, and how much meddling there's been in the last century with where our cultures are and where their borders are. And so I would just say leave the borders as is and allow the national sovereignty of each one to be defended to the max. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Russ Rizzo, who puts in a $10 super chat, and thank you, Russ, for the support. He says, do you know anything about this? April 19th, let's see. I think this one actually might be okay. It mentioned a congressman, so I was worried, but it looks like it's neutral. He says, April 19th, 2023, today Congressman Ogles introduced the Ukraine Lend-Lease Accountability Act, which would get rid of the exemptions granted in Ukraine. And what are your thoughts?
The exemptions granted in Ukraine, that does kind of sound like a political question, because I don't really know a lot about the congressman or the bill being passed, because I openly try and avoid ever looking into that to ever even have a thought of mentioning or talking about it. So unfortunately, I don't really think I could answer that one, because it may be political in a way. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to dodge that one, just in case if it did become political. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, yet again, who puts in a $6 super chat and says, "My hello LSA legends fine, because I can't say hi to y'all as fast as the enforcers do."
And thank you so much for the support and the hello to the LSA fund. I try and say hello to everyone at the start of the stream. I hope people do like that, because I always love to say hey to as many of y'all and try and talk to as many of y'all as I can. Sadly, I can't read long paragraphs that are put in during the first 10 minutes because there's so many people saying hey, and even then I miss a few of them because it's going so quickly. But I love to say hello to every single one of y'all because, you know, it's very nice, and I love knowing that I was able to talk to y'all, at least on a personal level, for a short while, although I wish I could do it a little bit better and a little bit more. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope we addressed that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Rob Torres and Keymaster for each putting in a $5 super chat, but with no comment. And thank you very much for helping to keep this channel running and the lights on and the computers on, the phones on, and the desk lamps on as well. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from John Clark, who says, "Hello from North Carolina to the LSA. Great job as always, enforcers." And thank you, John.
And 1 second. Oh man, excuse me.
Whoa, Gesundheit.
And hello to North Carolina. After that, after my brains were blown out. Hello to North Carolina. I hope you're having a fun time up there. Not that far from Alabama, actually. And we have been to Asheville, and we have been to Biltmore, which kind of got to be honest with you, Biltmore, I don't know. I'm just gonna say a little overrated to me.
I liked it actually. It was quite nice out there.
Well, I liked Blenheim better, in my opinion.
Blenheim. It's in a whole other country though.
Yes,
this is pretty nice though. For North Carolina, this is like out in the middle of nowhere basically.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I mean, like, what's weird about the Biltmore mansion is that it's built more like a hotel than a house. And I guess that's what you run into once they become like 180,000 square feet of house. But
the swimming pool area is creepy though in this castle.
Yeah, let me see. Let me see if I can find it.
Like somebody might have got drowned down there or something at one point.
The bowling alley is also very weird as well. Anything that's in the basement is just really weird, and I would tend to avoid.
You know, the whole story of Biltmore, it sounds like the guy who wanted it built started off, he wanted something grand, and then the guy who was building it slowly talked him into building it grander and grander and grander until finally he, like, you know, increased his bill like tenfold for the thing, and basically built something the guy really didn't want.
Yeah, and so I guess you could say, Matthew, that the guy said, "I would like a house," and then the builder said, what if we built more? And then the guy went,
"Yeah, so we call it Biltmore."
Yeah, Biltmore. Actually, it's named after the I think it's like I'm trying to think. Well, let's see, it was the Vanderbilt family that built this thing, but I forgot why it is called Biltmore. I think that may have been the name of the guy who did build it. It was Biltmore Vanderbilt or something like that, I believe. But there's not a lot of interior.
It looks
pictures.
nice though. Jeez, look at that sod out front. That's nice.
I know, it's nice. But still, I didn't like the interior layout. It was just really funky, you know. And then they only stayed in it like 3 months of the year. They lived in New York City for most of the year, and then came down here for 3 months. And it's cost them a third of their fortune to build this thing too. But still, I mean, like, it is, I guess you could say, the pride of North Carolina. It is one of the largest houses in the United States, and it certainly is cool. I mean, like, it is a cool house nonetheless. But honestly, I still have to be honest, do like Blenheim better. If any of y'all been to Britain and been lucky enough to go to Woodstock, not the Woodstock Festival, you would have gone probably to Blenheim Palace, which is the largest palace, I believe, in the United Kingdom. This is actually where Winston Churchill was born as well. He was born in Blenheim Palace. So, you know, he was not a common guy like many people believed. He had a pretty posh upbringing as a son of the Duke of Marlborough. But still, I mean, like, it's a very impressive building all the way throughout. Very nice. And the floor layout was really good, too. It was, I guess you could say, more conventional, in my opinion, although it's literally 1 million square feet of building inside of this thing, nearly. But still, oh, look at that!
Ooh,
oh, look at that!
A LaFerrari, looking all sweet and nice out there.
Man, look at that. It's a brand new Corvette. That's it.
Man, Corvette, get out of here.
No, I'm just playing with you. Oh, look at that.
I like the Ferrari better.
I think that's actually... Okay, I might be wrong here. I think this is actually one of the royal cars, because it's got that, like, claret color on it. I think this may be a part of the royal family's old car collection. because the color on it, correct me if I'm wrong, everyone, because I don't really know for sure, but still, pretty cool place. Nonetheless, hello to North Carolina, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel keep on running. And
Wait, I also saw somebody say, I would hate to be cleaning the baseboards in that Biltmore Castle. Look, if they're cleaning the baseboards themselves in a house that big, they don't need to be in that house. I mean, come on, they got to have maids in that thing or something. Because also, it's like, why would you use that many rooms in the thing? Like, how many square feet is it again?
like 189,000 square feet or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, 189,000 square feet. I mean, somebody could break in one side of it and you wouldn't even know they broke in.
Dude, just chilling in Biltmore. There's a firefight on this side of the building, and you don't even know it over here. You're just just chilling out over there.
It's like the alarm system goes off in this thing, and you gotta like run over like a Walmart trying to find the intruder.
Dude, you're in this building. You have to call in the fighting 93rd Brigade, the whole brigade into the building to try and hold it down. But some of the rooms are big, like this one. I think this was the dining hall on the right side of the building if you're looking at it head on. And this thing's just massive. It takes up like thousands of square feet of floor space. But it's just wide.
You gotta respect the gall of somebody to build a house this insane. Like, it's not realistic. There's that nasty swimming pool.
Yeah, there's that pool. Ew.
Dude, yeah, man, it's haunted looking swimming pool. I tell you what, this is like something. Like, this is not right. Like, I can't even say it. Somebody's gotten drowned down here, I have a feeling.
And you know, another thing, why in the world does the basement look like the halls of Fort Dumont near Verdun? Like, it doesn't even look like a house down here. It looks like we're about to be in some fortress.
This is the special basement.
Send him to the basement and let him have no water. No! And then you get thrown down here. He's just traveling around. There's some beast they have down here that'll eat you eventually. But anyways,
are those chains on the wall?
Chains? I'm dreadfully scared. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I actually saw a lot of North Carolinians saying that is pretty much a tourist trap. And it may be. It was still kind of interesting, though. And with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Russ Rizzo once again, who says, also, support Ukrainians by going to community centers like the Dnipro Club in Buffalo, New York. Anything like that near you, and great people.
And thank you so much once again for the support, Russ. Sadly, I don't know of any clubs like that near me because we've been so focused on doing this thing. We haven't really had a lot of time to expand outwards and look at other stuff. And that's been to our fortune sometimes and to our misfortune. But sadly, I don't know of any clubs like that. But still, I do thank you so much for the support, Russ. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running and keeping us in mind. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to, and yes, Danny Coco, he actually is a descendant of the Vanderbilts, to answer your question. Interestingly enough, kind of a sad story around that entire family and him as well. But because of his, connotation, we won't mention his name on the stream. But up next, we have a $5 super chat from Elder1, who says China's GDP is rising at a rate of 2.5%, while the U.S. GDP is rising by 5% per year. You were stating Chinese propaganda has been debunked.
I'm terribly sorry, but China GDP, and if you look at it right here, the list that's on Google is 8.1%. And this is the going number, and that's their GDP right there. I would love to agree with you, but it's not Chinese propaganda. That's how fast their economy is growing, according to the United States. More like the World Bank. That's the numbers they're going with. So that's the numbers we're going with. Because I would love to say that the economy is growing at a slow speed, but they are growing at a very rapid pace. If we look right here, over the previous years, they've been growing at a speed ever since they were growing quite slowly, quite negatively actually in the 60s, but ever since about, I would say 2000 right here, they've been growing at quite a speed indeed. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But sadly, quite unfortunately, I would have to disagree and say that they are growing quite quickly, and it is something of concern. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we do address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running.
And Trister once said, the Blenheim accent. And yes, it is. It's the Blenheim accent. And with that being said, we're on to our next super chat, which goes to Dark Warrior 137. He puts in a $5 super chat and says, for the remove all the copyrighted music from drone footage fund, someone bribed these effers to release the original raw footage and take a question from Matt.
Yes, me and my beautiful wife Camilla have been working around the clock to try and have the music from the footage removed, more like the score. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on
That's
running.
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes, I would like to address the right honorable gentleman. Let me wear my three-piece suit every day. But still, anyways, I do thank you for the support. I would thank you so much for supporting that fund. If we could get more funds supporting that fund, we may be able to eventually try it. It would cost millions, millions. But of course, we could always give it a shot. We could mute it. So with that, we will make sure to get a question from Matthew. So Matthew, what's your question?
All right, so my question is going to go to, let's see here.
No, it's supposed to go to you, Matthew. Answer.
Oh my, put that shotgun away, boy.
Oh dear, me and my beautiful wife Camilla are calling the police.
Anyways, dear, don't you think that's rather rash to break out the shoddy?
Don't you think that's rather rash, Governor, to pull out the buck, huh? But anyways, what's your question, Matthew?
So my question goes to Jim Kalari. He says, did you guys see the new Russian recruiting video? And you have to pull this up because I actually watched it. And it's basically premised around only, real men join the war against Ukraine. The real men want to go die for a dictatorial regime.
Oh, yes. I'll try and find... real men! Real men! Real fighting men! From the Ministry of Defense.
In the grocery store with a dang machine gun.
Wait a minute, is this man about to thwack someone with the paddle? Is he gonna thwack a man with a paddle? That doesn't really seem manly. That's just... This man was not as swole. This man was not as swole in the uniform, I can tell you that. This man just roided himself up in between takes. And what is this man lifting here? Lifting gerbils? That's like 5 pounds. What a tosser. Wait, hang on, hold up. Wait, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This man is lifting like 10 pounds best. This is a joke. Real men don't lift 10 pounds. They lift like hundreds. They don't... This man is literally bench pressing a shopping bag right here.
Yeah, Lewis said, you need a spotter for that, LOL? Seriously.
That's what real men need, a spotter. And this man's a taxi driver. Real manly. This guy right here, goes home and beats his wife, and he has a ring he calls my precious. This man is not a real man. This is a scary man.
Man, lay out the lines a little bit, jeez.
Goodness. Oh, and they got some cool music playing as they walk out of the fog.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Show what really happens, and let's see if anybody wants to join.
Look. It says 200,000 for dead. I mean rubles. Oh, man. How much is 204,000 rubles? Okay, let's add an extra zero. They get $2,500 as a sign-on bonus? Oh my god! This is terrible! Yeah, I would never join the Russian military. That's actually where our thumbnail came from tonight, too, was from this ad. I would never join it. This is a terrible ad. One second, let me take this back off screen for a minute. Oh my god. It's terrible. This is truly terrible. That is the worst ad I've ever seen. Really, it is. Yeah. I'm not even lying. So with that, we addressed that fairly well. Thank you for the support, and that's pitiful. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and also everybody was saying $240 and not $2,400.
Oh, really?
I was thinking when you said it, I was like, I don't think it says 2,000.
No, it said 204,000.
204,000.
Wait, hang on. Let me just put it back in. 200,000 rubles in dollars. It's $2,455.49.
Oh, I think you didn't refresh the top part.
Oh, yeah, it didn't. But still, the bottom part did refresh. So it is.
Oh, okay. That's why I got confused then.
Yeah. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Kristen Adams, who puts in a $5 super chat and says, "Love the food vids."
And thank you so much for the support. We've never even done a food vid yet, but we'll make sure to do one in the future, and hopefully you all like it. I would hope you like it. And so with that, we're on to the next one, Governor, and thank you for the support.
And up next, big shout out to Marc-Andre Brunette for putting in a $4 super chat, and Rhonda Bailey for putting in a 2. And big thanks to you both, and thank you very much for helping us to keep the channel running. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Joe Little, who says, "Subtitles, please. I'm usually driving and listening to the show, and Slav Ukraine."
And we will make sure to, Governor. We'll always be making sure to read off the subtitles, so that way everyone knows what they're saying. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And remember, I'm not a criminal. I'm not a gangster. I'm a businessman, and my business is crime. And so with that, I had to do it, Matthew. I was doing the accent. I was like, I have to do that, guy. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support, and we'll make sure to read off those subtitles.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Trister1. He says, "Antihistamine and Ricola Fund." And wow, thank you.
And thank you so much for the antihistamine and Ricola Fund. Of course, it helps this channel to keep on running, so that way we don't sneeze in the middle of it, and also don't get sore throats. And I thank you so much for supporting this channel as well, because your support does help us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the antihistamine puts me out like a light. So it does put you out quite badly. I mean, some people are going to say, "Man, I get a rush off of antihistamine."
Man, I snore antihistamine. So I was going to say.
Yes.
But anyway,
antihistamines and Ricola, that sounds like almost an addiction. But up next, we have a $5 super chat from Dark Warrior 137, who says, "I'm not far from Goldsboro, where the hydrogen bomb core is still missing. It's no longer dangerous, but still interesting history."
It is interesting history, and in case y'all didn't know, the U.S. Air Force had a B-52 breakup in mid-air, I believe, over North Carolina, and it ended up dropping 2 nuclear bombs on the coastline of the Carolinas. Funnily enough, neither of them blew up, but one of them was armed, but it still did not detonate on impact, which was a little shocking. But they didn't find out it was armed after the recovery team found it. And one guy who was looking at it said, "Sergeant, I found the detonator." And he said, "Oh, that's good." And he said, "No, it's not. It's armed." And then they were like, "Oh," it's like this thing could have gone off, and it didn't. So they were very lucky. But still, very interesting little story about North Carolina right there. I believe that was called the Goldsboro incident, if I'm correct. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on into the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Dark Warrior 137, who says, "Rah-ree, rah-rat." Take a question from the chat.
And thank you for the support, rah-ree, rah-rat. And we'll make sure to take a question from the live chat. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Jethro Bradley, who says, "Enforcer, any news on Ukrainian gains across the river in Kherson?"
No. We haven't gotten any news of that because we don't know of any crossings or any holdings that the Ukrainians have made over there. And so for now, that part of the front line remains absolutely stagnant. And so with that, thank you for the support. I hope that does, well, thank you for sponsoring that live chat, and I hope we answered that live chat fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Dupper Bob, who puts in a $2 super chat and says, "Slav Ukraine."
And Slav Ukraini. And thank you so much once again, Dupper Bob, for supporting this channel, because of course the support means a lot. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $4 super chat from Jorenna24, and thank you very much for the support, who says, "Math tutor fun, much love, and remember that time in 1961 when we almost erased North Carolina."
And we were just talking about that. We were just talking about the Goldsboro nuclear incident. Well, more like the bomb incident. And I thank you so much for the support, and I also thank you for sponsoring the math tutor, because of course I need help with maths, and I've been trying to get help with that, but no one really gives me any help with maths. I'm not that smart in maths, but I can tell you one thing I am. I'm street smart. That's why I go around with a shotgun and I shoot people in the leg with literal rock salt. And if y'all don't know who I'm talking about some like British gangster guy who was in North London, and he was famously known for shooting shotgun slugs at people that were filled with rock salt, because the rock salt would dissolve and it wouldn't leave any kind of actual like gunshot wound or anything, but it was extremely painful, because it would open up a wound and there would be literal salt in it, like embedded in it. So with that, just just to give a little bit of background to that joke, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was all of our super chats. So we are moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the streams. Of the stream, not the streams.
The stream.
We have JP's Gone Fishing, Rumpelstiltskin, C. Fay, Mark Hodges, Cliff Simonson, Dark Warrior 137, Paul Schultz, and Earl Bernew. And they said, the Morse says, the glorious Russian government says that, ... Wait, they changed that, ... And that one too, ... They don't really say anything anymore. Slava LSA and Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukrainian. And I'm overflowing in money, I'm dying. And y'all got that correct. Y'all did get the Morse code message correct. And that was the sound of money and someone getting crushed by money. But yes, that was the Morse code message, because their propaganda industry is kind of collapsing right now, and nobody really knows what the real story is anymore. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank y'all for deciphering that Morse code message again. And with that, we are on to the first question.
All right, and the first one goes to Snowy. He says, is Bakhmut being supplied by tunnel?
From what we understand, it may be. We've heard that a lot. That was something that was true with Vuhledar, but we don't really know about that with Bakhmut. So it's kind of on the fence, but we think it may be true, although we've never gotten proof of it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mark, PFC of the LSA. He says, in financial analysis based on Russian Ministry of Finance report, Russia will be broke at the end of 2023. And what are your thoughts?
I wouldn't doubt it, because they can't even pave roads right now in Russia because there's so little money inside of the country. So I wouldn't doubt it that the Russians do go broke by the end of 2023. I think that would actually be correct. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have a super chat this time. It's a $9 donation from David Malone. He says, I don't want to go on a power trip. I just want to buy some merch that says lieutenant on it. By the way, in Canada, we pronounce it lieutenant, not lieutenant.
And thank you for the support, David Malone. Always talking about his proper right lieutenant, eh? Oh, right, Governor. All right, that's a cheeky one right there, bruv. But moving on from that, and just kidding about how y'all say lieutenant. We say lieutenant. Actually, we say Lou as in, like, the way I think of it in my head is instead of like Lou as in LOO, I think of like in lieu of events. Like that's how I think of it being pronounced in my head. But anyways, moving on from that, we could probably try and get some merch that has something like that on it. I don't know. We always wanted to make LSA rank merch, where you could have like specific ranks like general or private or lieutenant, stuff like that. I thought that would be cool, but we never really got around to designing the ranks. So with that, I do thank you for the support. That would be a pretty cool idea, and we could look into it. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Bill Deplorable, who says, do tanks depreciate in value after you drive them off the lot like cars do?
I think they may. I think they might, because it seems as though that over the years, they heavily depreciate to being worth nothing when you give them away. So that may be the case. But once again, that's just me. And so with that, I hope that does answer that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And let's take a look at this poll, because Matt Weiss said, why would you poll that? Well, because I'm slightly nuts. The poll question says, legalize nuclear bombs, question mark. 78% said no, and 22% said yes. But I'm going to throw a curveball at you. You can't legalize them because they're not illegal, at least to my knowledge. So if you want one, you can have one. You know, honestly, what's preventing a person from having one?
Nuclear non-proliferation treaty.
Yeah, but that has to do between states.
Well, yes, but that also has to deal with individuals like little Timmy there who built the nuclear weapon in his garage. Because you're going to live in a country regardless wherever you're making this bomb. So, like, if you live in the United States and you make a bomb, obviously the U.S. government's going to stop you from having the bomb. And also, other countries may force the United States to try and stop that. I mean, like, everyone in the world would probably try and force the United States to stop this guy from owning a nuclear bomb, because it'd be violating the nuclear non-proliferation treaties that lay out who can and can't have nuclear weapons. And that guy would not be one of the entities in that treaty that would be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
Let me double check that real quick. Let's see here. Can a person have a nuclear weapon?
What a question.
Let's see. Is it? Here's the question: is it legal to own a nuclear weapon? Oh, there's actually a law, a U.S. Federal law against it. I never knew that actually, because I didn't think it was possible for somebody just to independently make one. Let's see. It's unlawful for any person inside or outside the United States to knowingly participate in the development of, manufacture, produce, transfer, acquire, and all the other terminology, any atomic weapon. You can't even threaten to use one. Let's see. Wow, if you do anything related to an atomic weapon, it's pretty much illegal under federal law. That's good to know, because, not like people running around with nukes every day, but it's good to know it's on the books.
Imagine someone robbing a store with a fat boy from Fallout. All right, it's a stick up. It's like, oh my God, that would be atrocious. But anyways, interesting poll with interesting results there. And I'm pretty shocked, honestly, that 23% of y'all said yes. I thought it would be like a unanimous no. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Everybody's saying I'm on a list. I didn't say to go make one. I just said it's illegal. That's all I said. But anyways, up next we have a question from Saswai90, who says, do you think there will be a point where the Russians know they can't win, or are they going to try till they run the country into the ground?
I think they're going to try until they run the country into the ground, because Putin is dead set on the strategic value of Crimea, and he wants to hold that regardless of the costs. So I think they're going to run themselves into the ground. And so with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one, Thorne said, what about the Second Amendment? Yeah, that's the right to bear arms. I don't think a nuclear bomb or missile is considered an arm. At least I don't think. Let's see.
Another Google later.
Considered. What's the definition of an arm?
Well, usually it's like a firearm, like a rifle, a pistol, a shotgun, something like that. Let me think, actually. I believe that we actually used to issue, I'm trying to think about that. I think people actually privately own cannons. I don't know. Don't take me on my word for that. Back in the 18th century, when the nation was founded, I think some people actually did privately own small cannons, but I don't really know for certain. But Matthew's
legal definition of an arm. Let's see. I'm not finding it right off the bat. So I can't. Let's see. I'm not finding like the answer I'm looking for right off the bat. I'll have to research it later. But that's actually kind of interesting. But it's illegal by federal law, so I think that would trump the no pun intended. I think that would go over the other one, if you know what I'm saying. I got messed up by saying the other word there for a minute, but anyways, let's move on to the next question and get off of that crazy topic. In Hansen says, there are Wagner soldiers going home and who are capable of actually doing anything.
Wait, what does that mean? I don't know what that
means. I don't know.
Unfortunately,
let's see. I think it was a question. Are there actually any Wagner soldiers going home who are capable of actually doing anything? Probably not, because they're probably severely injured, if not maimed.
Probably. I would have to agree with Matthew on that one. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Angry Pigwood said, politics! I don't know what made Matthew put up that poll. That was just a bizarrely weird poll. I'm gonna say this, though. I'm gonna give that one a letter of marquee in a way. That one wasn't really political. I think that was just a silly poll. But it was hilarious.
How's that political to legalize a nuclear bomb?
He's just messing around. He's messing around. He's just messing around. He said in live chat, I was like, so I'm gonna give that one a letter of marquee because it really is. It's just hilarious. But anyways, with that, we are on. Matthew, there's gonna be someone who leaves this channel and never watches it again because of that poll and runs to another channel. The one I'm talking about, the penal colony, and sits there and goes, "They're so crazy over there. They're losing their minds. They're talking about legalizing nukes or something like that. Like it was serious." But anyways,
they're talking about legalizing nuclear bombs. They're talking about it. Call them out. Call them out.
But anyways, with that, we are on We're going to be answering 3 more questions, actually, and then we're going to be running out tonight's stream. So with that, we are on to the next question.
The first day in law school, that's the question I'm going to ask. Professor, what prevents us from legalizing nuclear bombs? And they're going to be like, you know how it is with lawyers and legal people. Oh, that's a good question. Let's examine what an arm is. And they're going to go through that exact same stuff that I was talked about just then. It'll actually be pretty interesting because I'm kind of crazy like that. I kind of like to examine it in that kind of detail. But anyways, the next question goes to Drew Robinson. He says, did y'all hear that the Chinese are buying up all the U.S. farmland?
Yes, I have. I don't really put a lot of stock into that, though, because here's one thing about it. It's not like, I don't know what it is with people and acting like the United States is completely powerless, because if the Chinese sit there and go, oh, we're not going to farm on this land, take that, America. What's the U.S. government going to do? Oh, no, some other foreign country is doing something on our land, and we are completely powerless. You know what the government would do? They'd go, eminent domain, we're taking it back. Or they would sit there and seize, they wouldn't even call it eminent domain. They would just seize the land, redistribute it, probably auction it off to people that are not Chinese entities, and then it would be over. That's not concerning to me at all, because that's the way that would unfold. You know, like, people always act like the U.S. is just going to be like, it's like a supervillain movie, and somehow the government's going to be completely powerless and go, oh no, we're just bound to let them starve us to death. No, they would just seize the land. So that's why I don't really put a lot of credit or fear into that statement, because it's like, oh no, yeah, thank you for the cash, we're going to take it back in 10 years. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And thank you, Slava Something, for pointing it out. I did miss Dark Warrior 137 Super Chat. It was a $2 donation. And he says, for the weights fund, get that Russian more weights.
I think that little guy would cave because he's so malnourished, but we'll give him some more weights. He'll get crushed, though. And the guy spotting him certainly would have a really hard time struggling to lift those kinds of weights, because the guy's roided more than Liver King. And so with that, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
But he's natty, bro. You want some liver?
He eats raw meat. That's everyone in the world's getting worms because of this guy, but he's roided. We're on to the second to last one of the night.
And this one goes to Derek Banks. He says, Matt, do you think Russia may be evacuating border towns because they plan on using chemical warfare?
No, I think they're actually evacuating the border towns because they're afraid. And the Russian Legion that's been going across the border is causing the Russian citizenry in that area to get scared. And the Russians know that their forces are so poorly trained, they wouldn't be able to fight the Russian Legion there without leveling a village. So they don't want to end up leveling a village and having bad press inside of Russia. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who asked the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is Antonio Momot, who says Ukraine is currently trying to pass a law to prohibit criticism of the Ukrainian government. Punishment will be 5 to 7 years in prison. And do you have any opinions on it?
And the Ukrainian government is doing that?
Supposedly so.
I haven't heard about that, so I don't really know if that's true or not. I would have to look into that a little bit more to figure out if it's true or not. If so, I would say that's a violation of free speech. A lot of countries in the world don't actually have any provisions protecting free speech. The United States is actually kind of rare where we explicitly have a right to free speech. But as an American, you know, growing up on American rights, I would say that would be a violation of free speech. I wouldn't really like that. So that would be my opinion on it. But once again, I don't know if that's really happening or not. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. But with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. And, of course, I have to thank every single one of y'all for coming tonight. It's been a great stream, both covering the news and the question segment. And if y'all have enjoyed, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to share this with your friends, and help the Lee Spring Army to continue to grow. Of course, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and to also run the Sunday fundraiser and hopefully get a little bit closer to 1 million than we even got last weekend. And so with that, thank you all so much once again. I will see you all tomorrow. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, and of course, Slava Ukraini!
And good night, Slava Ukraine, and Herom Slava.
Suka, блядь!
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
усміхнеться доля, згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці, душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького